Good evening, Chair, members of Commission. Nothing specific, but good to see you. It's been another couple months, so welcome.
Why, thank you. Next item is public invited to be heard. This is for items that are non-quasi-judicial that would be coming before us. Nobody is on the list, but people are invited to come up if they have anything they want to talk to us about. You get 5 minutes. Seeing nobody come forward, I'll go ahead and close out public invited to be heard. Next item is approval of the April 24th, 2024 minutes. Do we have any questions, comments, or motions? I will go ahead and move that we approve the April 24th, 2024 minutes. Do we have a second? Commissioner Tetta?
Second.
Okay, let's take a vote.
Commissioner Height. Aye. Commissioner Tetta.
Aye.
Commissioner Boone.
Aye.
Chair Poland.
Aye.
Commissioner Flagg.
Aye.
Commissioner Kohler. Commissioner Popkin. Chairman, that passes 5 approvals, 2 abstentions.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to the public hearing items. The first item is the McDonald, let me bring this up here. The McDonald as Sandstone Marketplace Conditional Use Site Plan, presenting is Christine Coate, Planning and Development Services.
Good evening and thank you. I'm Kristen Cody, Senior Planner with Planning and Development Services. For your consideration this evening, I will be presenting the McDonald's at Sandstone Marketplace Conditional Use Site Plan. The subject property, encompassing roughly 1.19 acres, lies to the south of Ken Pratt Boulevard, west of Common Drive, and east of County Road 1. The property is currently zoned MUR, which is our mixed-use regional center zoning district, and became part of the city's jurisdiction in 1989, following the Maida annexation. As per the envisioned Longmont Comprehensive Plan, the property holds a designation of regional center. This slide provides an overview of the project proposal for the property, which involves the development of a 4,965 square foot fast food restaurant with a drive-through facility. The design is modern and complies with Section 1505.120 mixed use and non-residential design standards of the Longmont Development Code. The project enhances the customer conveniences by providing 205 feet of vehicle stacking in the drive-through, exceeding the 180 feet required by code. Additionally, it will contribute to the local economy through job creation and increased business activity. This slide shows a visual depiction of the site plan, which details access, parking, building configuration, and buffering. I'll give you a moment. Connectivity and parking have been addressed for this development. The developer has provided adequate parking exceeding the required 5% of bicycle parking spaces. Connectivity has been carefully considered with sidewalks connecting to the existing sidewalk on East Ken Pratt Boulevard and the future Bryan Avenue sidewalk right-of-way sidewalk, and integrated throughout the site. Additionally, 2 vehicle access points are provided at the property lines, which will be shared with the adjacent developments through blanket cross-access easements approved with the final plat of the Sandstone Marketplace subdivision. And this illustrates the connectivity on this property. As part of our review, we have thoroughly evaluated the architectural design. The applicant has proposed a 4-sided architectural design that uses various materials to create visual interest and variety, enhancing the character and quality of one of the city's gateway corridors. The next 2 slides provide color renderings of the building's design. And this shows the west elevation and the south elevation. And the next slide depicts the east elevation and the north elevation. Based on the record and preceding information, staff recommends approval of this conditional use site plan. That concludes my presentation. The applicant is also available to answer any questions this evening. Thank you so much.
Is the applicant going to do a presentation?
The applicant does not have a presentation this evening.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jane, do we have anybody signed up for this one? This is a public hearing item. As such, we will open it up for the public invited to be heard. On the list, we do have one person signed up, Shaquille Dalal. Please come forward. You have 5 minutes and just state your name and address for the record.
Shaquille Dalal, 219 Francis Street. Commissioners, this concept plan for a McDonald's is underwhelming, and while I'm sure that it complies with the entirety of Longmont's municipal code, I don't think it complies with the spirit of Envision Longmont and that you should require changes as a result. I don't have anything against McDonald's per se, I'm a customer, but the typical McDonald's double drive-through is not the kind of business that is appropriate for this location in the city of Longmont. I get that right now, this part of town is a car-centric disaster zone anchored by a Walmart, but it's not going to be that way forever. And this type of business in this location, and particularly with this type of site configuration, caters to people who are on their way to the interstate. I get that. You may recall that last year, Launch Longmont Housing member spoke regarding the Sandstone Marketplace development and criticized the walkability and multimodal accessibility of that development. In response to that, this body, and I believe it was Commissioner Flagg, asked the developer to make changes, including the addition of sidewalks. You did not ask the developer to improve connections to the adjacent residential neighborhood or the Walmart that the residents of the senior living facility will inevitably drive to in their cars because parking lots are terrible for people who are walking. I'm asking you not to make the same mistake again here. This McDonald's is a car-centric design with a fig leaf towards pedestrian accessibility across a 29-space parking crater. You'll notice that that parking crater was not in the beautiful renderings that were shown to you in the presentation. Not to mention that the double lane drive-through, a form factor which is hostile to anyone who might actually live in the neighborhood adjacent to this thing. We live in an era where forward-thinking cities are banning drive-throughs entirely. We should not allow this kind of multimodal transit hostile development to continue. The site plan for this property doesn't even actually address the neighborhood that it's in. It is specifically designed for cars. Instead of attempting a creative solution which attempts to create nearby neighbors as equal customers, the proposed site plan doesn't even actually connect to the sidewalk that is supposed to be around the perimeter of the entire Sandstone Marketplace block, let alone proper consideration for a resident of that senior living facility to get onto the property and then cross a 3-lane parking lot that's as wide as a 3-lane road. God forbid someone from the hospital that's across the street wants to eat at this thing. They're never going to walk across 119 anyway, so this site caters only to those people who are showing up in cars. I understand the reality that this location is good to get hungry people on the way to I-25, and I will probably be one of those people someday. However, I would ask this commission to do better and make the developer do better than creating another asphalt jungle. Thank you.
Thank you. And in the future, please watch your language, please. We have a decorum. Okay, there's nobody else signed up, but we still are open for people to come in and have any comments on this. We invite the public to come forward. Seeing nobody come forward, we'll go ahead and close out the public invited to be heard and move on to questions, comments, and potential motions from the commission. Commissioner Height.
Thank you. Ms. Cody, I think I have a couple questions regarding the site plan that confused me, particularly in relationship to the final plat. You referenced, I think, in your presentation, because I had a question about it, that the east side entryway and the west side exitway share ingress egress with the neighboring lots on either side. I missed that in the final plat.
Certainly, in the final plat, there's a note, I believe it's note 12, which is, references mutual cross-access easements throughout the development. These two access points onto the McDonald's lot are being constructed on the property lines. So going forward, as the lots adjacent on the easterly and westerly sides develop, they will be sharing access points with this McDonald's site, is the intention.
Okay, so it has been looked at. I did not see, there's actually two note 12s in the final plat, but you're looking at the second one, blanket cross access easements to be provided between all lots.
Correct.
Okay. Nextly, there's a 27.5 foot drainage easement that shows up on the final plat. That didn't look to be addressed in the site plan. Are you comfortable it's been addressed?
I believe that would be in relation to the lot that is east of this property.
Not what I saw, hold on. All right, attachment 4, site plan. Do you have a site plan available that you could put up?
I do, just give me one moment. The sandstone market. Oh.
Yep, it's on the south side. Who was asking that specifically?
I have it, I just want everyone else to know what the heck I'm talking about. So we're lot 6, block 1,
Correct.
which you reference as being 1.19 acres. The plat says it's 1.23 acres. Did it change at some point in time?
No, sir, it did not.
So it's 1.23? 1.253?
All right, so we have the site plan up.
Great. Do you have the final plat available too?
Let me go to my presentation.
It's attachment 4.
I can't, you're talking about the easement in the southeasterly corner would be my assumption?
It's all across the south side of the lot.
Okay,
So this depiction of the lot line with the bold dotted lines shows kind of in the middle, 27.5 foot drainage easement, which appears to be mostly off of the lot, as opposed to what it shows in the final plat, it's mostly on the lot. Did something change, first of all, between the final plat and this?
I don't believe so. I would
Okay.
think we may want to speak with our engineering folks about that, who are here this evening.
Okay. Because the acreage is wrong, this easement seems to be wrong. There's an easement on the north side as well, which I think is properly referenced, but it's certainly not clear.
You might grab the paper.
Good evening, Commission. Josh Sherman, City of Longmont Public Works. Sorry, just a second. I'm trying to get my bearings on the area that you're looking at.
Another interesting point is Bryan Avenue reflected in the site plan is only 44 feet wide. In the final plat, it's 50 and then 57.5 feet wide. It all seems to be different.
I see that on the right-of-way dimension. There is a drainage easement dedicated on the south side of this subject parcel. There's some private drainage infrastructure that serves this lot and the adjacent lots. The plat, which was previously approved for the commercial development, for both the drainage easement dimensions as well as the public right-of-way, would be correct. This is only a site plan, and there was no replat or other instrument to change any of the platted easements or right-of-ways. So yes, what you're pointing out appears to be a discrepancy in the labels and the labeling on this site plan from what was approved and what really controls, which is the subdivision plat.
I got it. So am I looking at this is a site plan. This is supposed to depict where on this lot these developments are taking place, correct?
Correct.
So it's supposed to be an accurate depiction of the lot.
Of the lot, and to your point, I think any encumbrances on that lot, such as existing easements.
Okay, but this lot doesn't show that it's contiguous with, I can't tell. Does Bryan Avenue abut this lot, or does it not, because it's now smaller than 50 feet?
No, this lot does abut Bryan Avenue. This site plan would not change the public right-of-way dimension, regardless of how it's labeled on this site plan map.
So, are you comfortable that this drainage easement is being taken care of by somebody who's required to take care of it, and maybe not the city if the city's gonna own Bryan Avenue?
Correct. The city will own Bryan Avenue, the drainage easement, and the infrastructure in that easement is not owned and maintained by the city. And I'm comfortable with that, yes.
And the 44-foot width of Bryan Avenue on this depiction on this site plan. Again, I understand it doesn't change the platting. The plat says it's 50 feet at one point, then it dips down to 57 feet. This is a correct depiction, though, in your mind, of what this is going to be in actuality?
I believe the site plan layout on the lot is correct, yes.
Okay, and the stuff that's off the lot,
Thank you.
well, if you look closely at this, that's the plat. The site plan. There's a reference, as I look, there's a lot of information here. But on the south boundary line, it says a proposed property line. Why is there a proposed property line? I understand you are not the applicant, but there's a reference to a proposed property line. What does
I
that
can
mean?
address that. The McDonald's folks started this process while the Sandstone Marketplace individuals were still in the plating process. So that was at the time when they were working through their site plan, it was a proposed property line. It then became a final property line when they did their final plat, and they did not change their labeling. So it is a property line at this time, but when they began this process, it was a proposed property line.
Okay. Well, with respect to that, and with respect to the depiction of this easement, which I think is wrong, and with respect to the depiction of Bryan Avenue, which I think is wrong, I'm not satisfied with this site plan off the top of my head. I mean, off the top, period. That said, Lot 4 of this subdivision, as I understood it, was going to be a retirement home or at least a residential community. And as I understand the request for this conditional use approval for the parking or the stacking of vehicles, the property can't be within 250 feet of a residential lot. This lot's across the street from a residential lot, from my understanding. Is that correct?
I believe it's a residentially zoned district, but I'd like to reference code just to ensure that that's correct. But, the whole property is zoned mixed-use regional, which allows for multifamily housing. And I believe residential compatibility states it's a residentially zoned district. But let me double check that and
Look at that, that'd be
confirm
great,
that for you.
because that's not how I had read the applicant, or the summary. And then finally, two, and if the applicant's not here, maybe I'm just beating a dead horse, but the EV stations being in the middle of the parking lot, seem to be a little unwieldy to me. Was there any thought or discussion of maybe placing them along the south side of the property, where they might be protected from being hit?
I do believe we have the applicant here, if you want to address that.
Hi all, I'm Shelby Green with Kemley Horn. I'm here on behalf of the civil engineering team. So because of the drainage easement that you mentioned, there's limitations in what structures we can place within that. So based on the easement, we were forced to look at other options for the EV stalls for those stations.
That's a great answer, appreciate that, thank you.
I'm gonna steal this back if that's okay.
While Ms. Cody looks up my issue, we can move on.
Okay. Next is Commissioner Popkin.
Thank you, Chair. That was loud. Couple questions for the applicant and for Kristen. But first, I want to just preface this with reminding the commission and everyone here first that this project is proposed in a mixed-use regional center, according to Envision Longmont. The primary use of that is a large format retail, restaurant, and similar entertainment use that attracts visitors from around the city and region. Couple clarifying questions first for the applicant. So Shelby, if you don't mind getting a few more steps in. Wonderful. Just simply put on a factual basis, kind of in terms of the context here, how many McDonald's restaurants are within Longmont city limits?
I would have to let McDonald speak to that.
Feel free to get your steps in as well.
How's it going? Trevor Profit, McDonald's.
Thanks, Trevor.
Yeah, so we currently have 3.
3. Thank you. And how many, to your knowledge, are within a 7 to 10 mile radius of the city, including the ones in the city? Or sorry, 7 to 10 mile radius of the site?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. I'd have to look that up for you on that one.
Would
Yeah,
5 sound about right?
Yeah, let's call it that.
Including one to the east of the site near the 119 I-25 intersection there.
Correct.
Merge lanes, and then one, I think, about 3 miles to the west.
Correct.
Cool, thank you. Great, and then a couple questions for Kristen here. Kristen, we emailed about this as well, just to clarify some of the intentions behind the code language and the Envision Longmont language. And so I'm hoping you can help me and maybe the whole commission here understand this better. Can you clarify for everyone here what a conditional secondary use is?
Certainly. Our secondary uses are certain uses that are permitted in the zoning district as being secondary to the primary use. And we have permitted secondary uses and we have conditional secondary uses which require a conditional use by the Planning Commission to allow for them to be pursued on a property. Typically, conditional uses are required because they're considered to perhaps need an additional level of consideration because they're, while being appropriate for the district, may need certain conditions to make them appropriate for the area, is a standard consideration with a conditional use.
Okay, thank you. So a restaurant, as I was reading before, for an MUR or mixed-use regional center area, is considered a primary use in Envision Longmont. It is considered a permitted use in the Land Development Code. Is that correct?
Yes.
But a restaurant with a drive-through is not considered a permitted use, and it's not considered a permitted secondary use either, according to the Land Development Code, correct?
Correct.
It is solely considered a conditional secondary use, right?
Correct, in this zone district.
Great, but a restaurant without a drive-through is considered a primary use in an MUR zone, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So it would be fair to distinguish between a restaurant and a restaurant with a drive-through for the purposes of determining whether an application is consistent with the Land Development Code and the Envision Longmont, correct?
I would say that's fair.
In fact, maybe not fair, necessary
Yes.
by the code, without implying any kind of subjective interpretation there. Jane, I believe I had sent you a couple slides to throw up on the screen. If we could throw those two up. While Jane pulls up the music video I prepared, no, I'm just kidding. I'll just point my fellow commissioners to pages 110 and 111 of Envision Longmont. I just simplified this and copied it directly over to a PowerPoint for ease of display. Perfect, thank you. So, Kristen, when we're trying to understand what is appropriate and envisioned for a mixed-use regional center, we should be looking at basically the Land Development Code and the characteristics as stated in Envision Longmont, correct?
Correct.
Great. So when we're looking at the 6 core characteristics here, really the focus as I read this, and I'm going to paraphrase a little bit here, but I wanted to put it up for everyone's awareness so that you know I'm not trying to spin any language here. Really the focus is on high density housing and employment options, proximity to transit, targeted infill, accommodating higher density, pedestrian and transit supportive uses over time, clear pedestrian and bicycle connections to surrounding areas to promote connectivity and accessibility, the integration of public facilities that may be readily served by existing and future public transportation. Regional centers should be pedestrian oriented and include public plazas, outdoor dining, green space, and other community gathering spaces. And there's a specific note here in number 6 that I'll just read verbatim. While regional centers may be largely auto-oriented today, future development should be designed, so today meaning when Envision Longmont was published and ratified in 2017? This predates my time here, but is that correct? 2017? 2016? Thank you, Phil. So while regional centers may be largely auto-oriented today, as in 2016 when this was published, future development should be designed to support existing and future transit and reduce surface parking. If we can go to the next slide. Thank you. I promise this is the end of the music video that I have on the screen. The primary use, as I read before, large format retail, restaurant, and similar entertainment that attracts visitors from around the city and region. Secondary, I'll just summarize to say, no mention of restaurants. Where I'm trying to go with this is when we are considering whether a conditional secondary use is appropriate here, frankly, a restaurant with a drive-through doesn't seem to me to necessarily fit in. A restaurant, absolutely. Restaurant with a drive-through, conditional secondary use that's not primary, not described in secondary. I would welcome comments to suggest that maybe I'm wrong here and misinterpreting this, but if I'm reading this directly, this seems a little bit out of place. And let me get back to my notes. And I think the last thing I'll just note here, and then I'll yield to my fellow commissioners for their thoughts. The primary use in Envision Longmont is large format retail, restaurant, similar entertainment. We focused on that already. These types of uses that attract visitors from around the city and region. When I think of 3 other McDonald's restaurant establishments, 2 others on either side of this site within, I think, a 5-mile radius, I wonder what we're really attracting, like what the attraction is there. And that's nothing on the applicant in any way, shape, or form. I'm just thinking about what is this drawing to the regional center that this is supposed to be. Last thing I'll note, there are McDonald's restaurants and other fast food restaurants with drive-thrus in other regional centers in Longmont. Those, I believe, were largely built and created before Envision Longmont was set up. And if we read the language in Envision Longmont, it's really looking to the future and looking at what we build in regional centers going forward. I will yield.
Okay. Thank you, Kristen, do you have an answer for Commissioner Height?
I do. So the verbiage states that restaurants with drive-through facilities located within 250 feet of a residential lot in a residential zoning district shall comply with residential compatibility standards in section 1505.200. And this is all zoned mixed-use regional.
Say it again, I'm sorry. I got 1505080. What was the one you were just like?
Let me find that quote for you. Bear with me, my computer is not wanting to go quickly this evening.
Kristen? We can move on. I think. Chairman, you would.
Okay. Let's go ahead. Next is Commissioner Flagg.
I have to push this. Thank you, Chair. I guess I have a question. I don't know who I should address it to. What's our planner's name? Our planner. I guess to the planner.
Kristen.
Kristen? I can't find it, but I'm looking for the bicycle rack. I've gone over this list, I must be missing something. I see a shelf at 18. Maybe my,
And this is relatively small, so we'll just make it a little bigger.
I tried that and didn't work for me. Yeah, I saw the number, I'm just trying to
To
figure
the
out where.
west of the building. And I believe it's right in this general area, if I remember correctly. Across the, right in this general vicinity. Right there. This is the area where the bicycle rack is placed.
Yeah, it's more south of that, so the ADA ramp, just south of that ADA.
So somewhere in that larger area,
Thank you.
adjacent to the accessible parking?
It is adjacent to the accessible ADA path that leads to the right-of-way.
Okay.
Not adjacent to the parking per se, but it is ADA accessible.
Okay. Oh, I see, it's across the driveway.
Mm-hmm. So right where the cursor is hovering
Okay.
currently.
I see it
Don't wanna
now.
move it.
And you also have a pedestrian access there on the east side, and it's going across the driveways leading to the ordering lanes, and then it stops.
So actually the sidewalk connects north and south to the northern right-of-way, crosses the drive aisle past the one-way drive-through drive aisles, and enters into the sidewalk adjacent to the building. And then it also continues south to Bryan Avenue to the right-of-way to the south as well. So
And where is that shown?
you can see through the red dashed line shown on the screen. Is there potential to make it larger? Do I zoom in?
I can't see on the screen.
Yeah, that might be best if we just present. Kind of. That didn't quite work, did it?
It's not coming out.
So we were trying to see a full visual of the red ADA, or the red pedestrian access path.
Well, I have it on your site plan as
Mhm.
part of the submittal.
Yes,
And
this
it-
is an additional document that was provided for this meeting. It just makes
I
it
can't
more
seem to bring it
clear.
up. So, at the end of the property, the sidewalk has to go further than that?
It does extend slightly beyond the property line so that it can meet the existing sidewalk to the north per the master
To
development.
the north, but
Mhm.
not to the south?
To the south, there's already a sidewalk per the master development running east to west across the frontage of our site. So we connect to that one as well.
And you connect to that one from the sidewalk that crosses the ordering lanes, the one-way north ordering lanes, and then there somehow is a sidewalk in there that connects to the south sidewalk? Or do people have to go to the west side to cross? to-
Oh, so there is access to the east as well, which I believe is what you might be looking at.
Mhm.
That dead ends, apologies, I didn't quite catch
Okay,
on.
so that dead ends right there.
It does, it is for future access to the adjacent lot. So ideally, the adjacent lot would develop a continuation of that sidewalk to allow connectivity through the master development.
Okay, and so, we have no idea who's in that adjacent lot.
We don't personally, that would be a question for the planner.
We do not. We don't have any applications pending, or we haven't had any pre-apps for that lot.
And so, okay, so you have two ways to get into the drive-through, one on the east, one on the west. And somehow or another, they all join in this nebulous space here, where they sort themselves out between going in a loop back to the west to perhaps get in the quick pickup lanes or accessible parking, or they're going north into the ordering lanes. So how many stacked cars are you providing for
I believe the
on site?
Yep, I believe the requirement is 15 feet, and I believe we allow for 18 feet. I think I have in my notes more specifically what the actual length of that stacking space is. Thank you. Yeah, so the city requires 180 feet of stacking length, and we provide 202 feet.
And tell me where those 202 feet are.
So to the northwest corner of the building, those cars can stack from the pickup window east around the curve all the way to the beginning of the drive-through on that far east side.
So on the adjacent property, in effect.
No, it will remain on site. Our entire drive and access through the drive-through itself, it remains on our property.
But I see an arrow that allows for coming out of the property that's on.
Yep, so that's for the site itself, just a shared access point for access into the site. Our stacking spaces do not account for that area. Our stacking spaces are cut off before the crosswalk to the east.
How many cars?
It says about 15 cars can fit into the drive-through based on the 100, or based on the 202.
And how many cars does McDonald's really stack at breakfast?
That would be something that McDonald's would have to speak to. Or
Yeah, I think the question is kind of changes in every location, right? I think right now we have a setup for a drive-through with a double. That's why we have the double drive-through to help get that stacking to not be as far out, so we can get orders into our kitchen further. The further distance we have from our order point to our first window allows for the time for the kitchen to make that meal. By the time you get to the window to pay, you're continuing forward to the pickup order, and then we have the third window as well to keep moving that traffic forward. On the front of the site, you can also see that we circulate it around on the west side. That allows cars to pull forward, so we're still keeping connectivity with the building, allowing our crew members to get out to that car safely, but also quickly to, again, get that car off the site just as well. So the stacking and the operation of the McDonald's is for the efficiency of that drive-through to keep that moving quickly. To answer your question about the stacking numbers, that's a very kind of dependent on the time of day, dependent on the day of the week, can be dependent on many things.
Well, you're on the south side of a major, normally eastbound connection
Yes.
down to I-25.
Yep.
And the way you're perched there, it would seem to me that you're trying to get the breakfast traffic in there.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely, we'd love to, yes.
Uh-huh. So, you have a very compact site there, and everybody has got to function perfectly in order for it to all move.
I understand that. I guess that's, again, on the operational piece where I could speak to is why our efficiency of that. I mean, the time in the drive-through is to be as quick as possible to get them off the site
Thank you.
and move that forward. Yes, ma'am.
Kristen, do we want to go back to Commissioner Height?
Certainly, to address Commissioner Height's request for a code section that is stated in 1504.030.d.12. And that states restaurants with drive-through facilities located within 250 feet of a residential lot in a residential zoning district shall comply with the residential compatibility standards in section 1505.200.
Thank you very much for looking that up.
Are you satisfied for right now, Commissioner Height?
I'm doing my own. Yes,
Okay.
I'm satisfied with the answer.
Thank you. Commissioner Flake has a follow-up.
Somebody from traffic available? I have a question about that interesting curb cut to the south there. It sort of jags in about 7.5 feet. And I'm wondering what that is for. Somebody?
My apologies, I was in the back still discussing the dimensions of the lot, which are, the lot's labeled dimension correctly in the site plan. It's just that mislabel on the right of way. It's this question. Can I ask for the question to be repeated? I apologize.
There is on the curb cut that sort of is drawn and represented on this site plan, on the overall plan. And I guess site plan, we don't actually see that. But in the overall plan, there's a kind of a jog in there in what appears to be a curb cut. I mean, it's just the curb there, and the curb kind of jogs in
On the south side.
on the south
Okay,
side,
yeah, on
about
the south side.
7.5 feet.
There is some on-street parallel parking on the south side of Bryan Avenue right of way. So
At that point, across from one of your entrances.
it's across from the west entrance of this subject property, yes.
Thank you. This is east side, but okay,
Are you all set?
I'm done.
Okay.
Thanks.
Commissioner Boone.
Thank you, Chair. Many of my concerns have been addressed, some of them by Mr. Dalal, so I appreciate your presentation. Some of them by Commissioner Height, some of them by Commissioner Popkin, some of them by Commissioner Flagg. So I'm left with a short list, which is always nice. I'm going to, first of all, say that just because a site has a possible conditional secondary use available does not necessarily mean that it is an appropriate use for the site. It's a secondary conditional use that is allowed in the zoning, not necessarily for the site. But with that in mind, the main thing I want to throw out is some comments about this very extensive traffic study. First of all, my understanding of what Longmont is working with respect to intersections and whatnot is to not drop below level of service of D. And according to the traffic study, they've looked at existing conditions, they've looked at the 2025 conditions with and without this project, and the 2045 conditions with and without this project. The bottom line is that intersection of 119 and County Line Road is a mess. And currently, it has a D level of service rating. The projected 2025 level of service rating with this project becomes a level E. And the 2045 level of service rating goes down to an F. From my understanding, I don't think there's anything scheduled for that particular intersection in the near future. But please correct me if I'm wrong. But it seems like, okay, I'd love to hear from you. And the other thing I'm going to pull out of the traffic study, there's a table for Sandstone Marketplace traffic generation, and it gives a lot of different types of businesses: the senior adult housing, the medical dental, the daycare, strip retail, fast casual restaurant, high turnover restaurant, and a fast food with a drive-through. The fast food with a drive-through has anywhere from 5 to 8 times the number of trips, weekday vehicle trips, as any of those other uses. So based on the traffic information alone that I have, it doesn't appear that this is really an appropriate use for this piece of the site. And I'd love to hear from the traffic folks.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Phil Greenwald, Transportation Planning Manager with the City of Longmont. I'm here to kind of answer those bigger picture questions, so that's perfect. Thank you very much. What we're talking about is there is the traffic study that talks about the individual movements, but we have to look at the bigger picture of Envision Longmont allowed for all these uses to be in this location. And so Envision Longmont and the traffic system that's part of that was approved, understanding that all those different land uses were going to be applicable in this location, and that would allow those type of restaurants and that type of zoning. So the bigger picture piece of this is really that our transportation system can handle it. There may be certain movements that fail at certain times of the day, but overall the transportation system can handle it. And we're also doing a lot of things with alternative mode transportation, including, and I always kind of throw this out and people are tired of me talking about it, but microtransit is coming online this summer. And we're hoping that that takes a lot of the traffic issues away, as well as people can get through the system without necessarily having to own their own vehicle. But obviously it's still a vehicle that's going through these places. But we can talk more about the actual specific piece, but the bigger picture is that the land uses that were part of Envision Longmont were planned to be these very uses. Drive-through restaurants were part of that modeling piece that was done. So the answer is that we Envision Longmont includes those pieces, and the Planning and Zoning Commission took a look at that and approved that as part of the planning process, as well as City Council.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to remind the Planning Commission that the impacts to level of service was approved with the approval of the Sandstone Marketplace preliminary plat. And as part of the traffic compliance letter submitted with the McDonald's application, originally it was a 6,000 square foot fast food restaurant with a drive-through that was proposed here. This is a obviously smaller fast food restaurant with a smaller impact. So originally it was a 2,800 daily trip that was planned, and this is looking like a 2,000 daily trip. So we have 766 fewer trips with the smaller restaurant proposed. Thank you.
Anything else?
I don't think so. Thank you.
Do we have anything else for anybody? Phil, if you can come forward again. It seemed that Commissioner Popkin brought up that Envision Longmont, when it brought up the secondary uses, that it did not include a restaurant with a drive-through. Is that an omission, or how do you explain that?
Commissioner Poland, I would say that I'm an expert in the transportation piece of this, but I am not going to be able to help you too well in the different categories of land use. But I think when we talked about restaurant, it was most, and I probably shouldn't even guess, but I feel like the restaurant included the drive-through piece of that, and it was probably likely an omission in the statement categories. But I think that we're talking about restaurants with drive-throughs and without. So, but I would defer to some of the more expert folks with the land use qualifications that I don't have.
Okay, thank you, Grant. It looks like you want to chime in.
Sure. Just as a brief overview, I think you hit it on the head. I wouldn't consider it a specific omission, but generally, of course, with a comprehensive plan, it's very difficult to include every single land use that is contemplated. I think at a broad level, the notion of including restaurants was, again, included in as a secondary use. And as you all know, of course, as you go from the guiding document of a comprehensive plan, Envision Longmont, to the specific land use regulations that is zoning, of course, that is when you get the very robust, lengthy list of allowed land uses in whatever capacity, whether it's primary, principal, secondary, or conditional, if that helps.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Popkin.
Yeah, I will unsurprisingly pick up right where Chair Poland left off. This distinction is really interesting to me And because I don't know if it's an omission per se, and I'm not sure if that really matters at the end of the day. But Grant, to your point there, I do take that, we can't include everything in a guiding document, and then we look to the code. And so that's where we look to the land development code. And so chapter 15, section 2 there of development review procedures point out the distinction very explicitly of a restaurant being a permitted use and a restaurant with a drive-through being a conditional secondary use. So that's explicitly called out in the land development code. That's when I go back to Envision Longmont to see what was actually intended by that regional center designation. And that's where we get back to the primary use there being large format retail, restaurant, or similar entertainment uses. And I think this might be a really key phrase here, that attract visitors from around the city and region. And given the pedestrian transit and future-oriented nature of what a regional center is aiming to do, I remain a little skeptical, frankly, that a drive-through establishment that has multiple affiliates within a 5 to 10 mile radius, including kind of the core gateways to this side from the west and to this side from the east, is going to attract visitors from around the city and region. I'd welcome any comments that you have on that.
Sure, just a quick input, Commissioner. Again, don't disagree with the language in the Envision Longmont, but I guess I would just add for your thought and consideration, again, in terms of this being a guiding document, those secondary uses and primary uses are generalized, and I think the goal of having regional attractors, I don't believe the intent is to have every single use as a regional attractor. And again, I think that's where you start to get into the primary and secondary uses. I think the intent of that land use designation is to broadly be an attractor. However, again, I think the anticipation is there's going to be ancillary or secondary uses that wouldn't necessarily as a standalone be a regional attractor, if that helps.
It does help. And I guess I take your point wholeheartedly there. And I guess the interesting distinction in Envision Longmont here on page 111 is that only the primary uses are specifically noted to have the attract visitors from the city and region. When we get into offices, public facilities, medical, other supporting apartments and all that, it's not specified that that is intended to be an attraction for the city and region. So there is some level of distinction within Envision Longmont there. Maybe you can help shed some light on this, you or Kristen. When we're thinking about what constitutes a conditional secondary use, Kristen, we talked about the definition of that early on, and I guess what is that conditional upon?
It would be conditional upon any conditions that you as a planning commission felt necessary to make it appropriate for the general area. So if there were any facets of the operation that you felt needed conditioning to make it an appropriate use for that general area, that's typically what you're looking at when you're looking at a conditional use. Generally, a restaurant is appropriate in an MUR district, but there are some facets of the operation that may be impactful for a neighborhood without conditions of operation. Not in this instance, but in other uses, you might look at hours of operation, stacking, noise control, buffering, those kind of things for different sorts of conditional uses. So it would be really, as a planning commission, where you'd have to look at what you would see as an impact that you may need to put some sort of condition on it. My assumption would be with a drive-through, you would be looking at stacking, would be a potential that you would consider if you thought there would be some kind of an issue looking towards, placing conditions. So a conditional use would be a use that would generally be okay in a district, but may need conditions put on the operation that make it more generally acceptable to the area.
Thank you. So the conditional secondary use, if I'm understanding you correctly, is really speaking to the fact that, unlike a restaurant without a drive-through, which is permitted in an MUR situation zone, a restaurant with a drive-through basically inherently lends itself to or opens the door to greater conditions to make it more appropriate for a regional center designation? Is that effectively what this is suggesting? It's not saying like we could condition, well, this would obviously be ridiculous to condition it to not have the drive-through so it would be permitted. That would be stretching the bounds of what this is intended to do, correct?
Correct. I mean, other conditional secondary uses in this zone district include like commercial recreational facilities, outdoor, restaurants with a drive-through, obviously, vehicle sales and rental. Those are other conditional secondary uses in this zone district.
So the conditionality, though, is more about how it
How it,
integrates with the.
with the neighborhood and area in general.
It's
Are
not
there-
conditional upon. I mean, is like when I'm looking at this, I'm looking at, section 15.2, review criteria 1. The application is consistent with the comprehensive plan and the purpose of the code and zoning district, which, as I mentioned before, seems to stretch the purpose of what a regional center is intended to do, at least looking forward. But it sounds like a conditional secondary use is not aiming to be much more subjective in terms of whether it aligns with the comprehensive plan or not. It's just we might be able to we might have more leeway to condition a few things to make it integrate better with a regional center.
That would be how I would look at the conditional secondary uses. I don't know if Grant would have anything that he would like to add to that.
Thank you.
Sure, and maybe I'll actually look to the code and
Great.
give you some food for thought. I think Kristen covered quite well in terms of the intent of the conditional use, and so the specific guidance that is included in section, and if you want to look it up, it's 1502.060C2, authority to impose conditions to ensure compliance with standards. As with other types of application, the decision-making body may impose conditions on proposed conditional use to ensure compatibility and to ensure that potential adverse impacts on surrounding uses, properties, public health or safety, the environment, or the district will be substantially mitigated.
Sorry, can you read that part one more time?
Sure.
A little closer to the mic, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry
Thank
about that. Do you want me to start at the top? As with other types of application, the decision-making body may impose conditions on a proposed conditional use to ensure compatibility and to ensure that potential adverse impacts on surrounding uses, properties, public health or safety, the environment, or the district will be substantially mitigated. And then it goes on to say, as examples, conditions may include, but are not limited to, measures addressing the amount or location of secondary uses, outdoor activity or storage, location on a site of activities that generate noise, odor, vibration, glare, or other adverse impacts, location of buildings or structures generally, and hours of operation and delivery.
There's a phrase in there, adverse impacts on the zoning district or on the district itself.
So, yeah, it is included, the potential adverse impacts on surrounding uses, properties, public health or safety, the environment, or the district will be substantially mitigated.
And district there is referring to the regional center?
District in this case would be the zoning district itself.
Okay. Maybe a question for council, and sorry, remind me of your name since you're not Jeremy.
Good evening, Tim Hall. I'm an assistant city attorney.
Thanks, Tim. Excellent answer to my question. Legally speaking, in terms of the distinction here, the land development code clearly breaks down the differences between a restaurant and a restaurant with a drive-through. When we look at primary uses of Envision Longmont, as the chair rightly pointed out, that distinction is not made either by intent or omission. We can't necessarily know. Is that something that we as a commission need to factor in here? And if so, how?
I don't know that my answer would be any different than the answer Mr. Penland gave earlier. It seems to me that Envision Longmont is more of a guiding document that gives general principles, and you have a specific development code that provides the exact uses. I don't disagree that you could consider that, but I don't know that I would change my answer from Mr. Penland's.
Okay, thank you. I'm struggling with this distinction. I I look at the intent of Envision Longmont here. I think if this was a McDonald's restaurant without a drive-through, the intent is clear. It's allowed, it's permitted, and it should go forward. Restaurant with a drive-through here that has multiple other affiliates that I think beg the questions, make me skeptical of whether it's actually going to attract visitors from around the city and region intentionally as a primary restaurant use.
But as a secondary use, one could make the argument
As
that
a secondary use, it's not even listed.
I know, but one can make the argument that it's supporting the businesses that are in that regional center.
Well, I would welcome the chair to make that argument.
One way to look at it, as I see, is when I look at a regional center, I look at what's in that area. One is Walmart, and I believe that Walmart used to have McDonald's, and if I'm not mistaken, it no longer has one in it. So in that area, at least at some point, there was a McDonald's. And a secondary use could be the fact that it's not the thing that pulls the people in, but it's to support the people that do come to that regional center. I mean, you could envision somebody picking up their child from childcare, heading home for dinner, and then wanting to stop at a drive-through to get a meal. Look at this. If this was a coffee, if this was, let's say, a Starbucks, would we be having the same conversation? Because a Starbucks would need a drive-through.
I would make the same exact argument for a coffee shop with a drive-through as I would for a McDonald's restaurant with a drive-through. I don't see any distinction. Sorry.
Yeah, let me get you back on.
A point of personal privilege, since we're engaged in a little bit of sporadic debate here. I would make the same exact argument for a coffee shop with a drive-through as I would for a McDonald's restaurant with a drive-through here. I think, especially if that coffee shop has 4 other locations or 2 other locations within either side of that corridor.
But realistically, the one to the east is 2 miles away, and I'm trying to think the one to the west, the McDonald's to the west, is over off of Main.
It's about 3 minutes and 7 minutes in each direction.
Which, to somebody who may be going up County Line Road or may not have to go over to Main, may be at the hospital wanting to get something fast to eat. I mean, as a secondary use, and this is where it comes down to, I don't know if it specifically omits it or doesn't omit it. So, as I look at this, I mean, I also struggle with this, because if this had been a business right off of 119, where it had access directly off of it, I think you could make a better argument that it was to attract people to stop and get food and get back on 119. To get to it, you do have to drive off of 119 and go into this retail center. And that's where I struggle with. I understand that this is going to need food places to help support what's there. And what I'm struggling with is, do we put a condition that no drive-throughs and that everything there has to be a sit-down place? That's what I'm struggling is, do we put that condition on that a place where a restaurant has to be a place where people go and sit down to eat? Do I go to that point where I make that kind of condition? That's kind of what I'm wrestling with. Commissioner Flake.
Thank you. I need to talk to the McDonald's person again, please, and I'm sorry I don't have your name.
Trevor.
Trevor? Trevor, how many customers at a time can this McDonald's serve in its interior space?
On the inside, we have multiple order points. So we have 4 order points, so 2 single-side kiosks, 1 double-side kiosk, and then there's still an opportunity to order at the front counter as well. Along with that, you as a customer can sit inside at your table and make an order from your table by scanning a code. You can also order from your mobile phone sitting at the table. You can order from your mobile phone at home.
How many seats at the table are there that one can eat at?
at the table we have multiple sizes, so we try to meet different size parties. So there's a community table inside that I think we will have up to 6 to 8 seats at that, and then there's down to 4 seats and then 2 tops as well. So we have a variety of size seats inside.
What is the occupancy number for the restaurant?
60 seats on this one.
Inside,
Correct.
at a time?
60 seats inside it. Yeah, inside the restaurant. Correct. So you can have 60 customers sitting inside,
Okay.
sitting down.
Thank you.
Yep.
Do we have any other questions, comments? Commissioner Popkin.
Question for you, Tim, on the legal side here. Chair Poland was tossing out an interesting concept here of wrestling with whether to put a condition of no drive-throughs, to paraphrase slightly. Given that it is a conditional secondary use in the code, is that an appropriate type of condition for the commission to impose here? If we felt that that would help make this project, and from my perspective, future projects like this, to align with Envision Longmont and the Land Development Code?
I will clarify that it's a mixed-use residential, or residential.
Regional center.
Regional center. So the fact that it is or is not in, I think kind of leaves it up to us. And the fact that it's conditional does leave it up to us. And I think what we need to wrestle with is that type of restaurant, is a drive-through restaurant appropriate for this regional center?
I understand. I wanted to clarify with legal counsel to make sure that the fact that it is stated as a conditional secondary use, which means it in theory is an option, and out of fairness to the applicant, I think they saw that and would say they think that that is allowed under an MUR situation. I just wanted to understand if that is a legal condition.
So
In theory, that would set the precedent from this commission that drive-through would not be acceptable in an MUR situation, whether it's McDonald's as an applicant or any other applicant.
In any regional center?
In any regional center, correct.
So I would direct your attention to 1502-060C, conditional uses 2, which is the authority to impose conditions to ensure compliance with standards. That's language that was already read to you, but I do think that's prescriptive as to the type of conditions that you can impose, which was ensure compatibility and ensure that potential adverse impacts on surrounding uses, properties, public health and safety, the environment, or the district will be substantially mitigated. Conditions may include, but are not limited to, measures addressing the amount or location of secondary uses, outdoor activity or storage, location on a site of activities that generate noise, odor, vibration, glare, or other adverse impacts, location of buildings or structures generally, and hours of operation and delivery. So I would suggest that you should keep your conditions within that broad guidelines of guardrails, I would say, of the type of conditions that you can impose. As to whether that type of condition would be appropriate, I'm not sure I have an opinion on that. It does seem like it would bump it outside of a condition that the conditional secondary use and into just a permitted use.
Right, if there was no drive-throughs, if the condition was no drive-through. Right, I also assume that it would be a fundamentally different business decision for the applicant as to whether they would move forward with this exact project in the proposal if that was a condition that they were aware of. So I want to be thoughtful there. I want to tease this out a little bit more here and then yield to my fellow commissioners for their perspective on this. When I look at another, let me make sure I'm looking at the right, yes. Another conditional secondary use in the Land Development Code that doesn't have to do with restaurants, that would point me to like a commercial recreation facility that's outdoor. And when I look at an outdoor commercial recreation facility, in theory, that is the same designation in the code, a conditional secondary use, as a restaurant with a drive-through. However, I look at the characteristics in Envision Longmont for a regional center, and to me, that sounds very much aligned with a pedestrian-oriented public plaza, green space, or community gathering space type situation, higher density pedestrian transit supportive uses, promoting connectivity, accessibility, and other services. So how subjective do we want to get? I'm not sure, but I would welcome the perspective of other folks on the commission. I will yield.
Commissioner Flagg.
As I'm looking at this, it feels like so much is trying to be crammed on such a small space. And I'm not comfortable with how it's being done, but I don't feel myself up to redesigning the space. That's not what I'm here to do. This is really trying to shoehorn something in where I think that, yeah, they could have the capability, but we don't have in and out pedestrian access on both east and west side. There's a dependency to have on the east side a sidewalk contingent on who develops or when they develop on that east side. I'm, yes, by the code and by measurement, it says you've got enough stacking. I don't think you do, realistically speaking, because in real life, I've been to McDonald's at breakfast and other times. And unless you've got enough stacking on the site and good traffic patterns, it's a real problem. And there's always going to be a problem with getting orders to people if they have a special order. Not everybody uses the app, and not everybody is perfect. I don't see how I can support this. It just feels like it's just being crunched in. There are differences in the site plan. That was pointed out earlier by Commissioner Height. It just feels like it's being pushed, and maybe another look needs to be.
Commissioner Height.
Thank you. Is this on now?
Yeah.
I don't know if green, red, whatever that means. To add to Commissioner Popkins' soliloquy examination, my sense is Envision it is forward-looking and sets forth a plan by which we have developed the code. The code, as I read the table of uses, permits as a conditional secondary use, subject to two specific statutory references, one to the 250-foot limitation that Planner Cody pointed out to me, and the other one being to the contiguousness of the operations to a park. It's allowed as a conditional use, and as Tim, I forget your last name. Mr. Our attorney helped us out, pointed out that 1502060C, conditional uses, the means by which we are to examine and develop conditions are set forth there. We can condition uses in congruence or in relationship to these review criteria. That all said, I kind of think that even if it is shoehorned in, they otherwise seem to be ticking off all of the necessary conditions for approval, but for the fact that their site plan is based upon the preliminary plat and not the final plat. It doesn't represent really what they're doing, so I can't support it because the plan is on the wrong napkin.
Commissioner Boone.
Thank you, Chair Poland. Not to beat a dead horse, but I just want to finish my thought a little bit relative to transportation. First of all, Envision Longmont, if you look at the overall map of the city, where all of the regional centers are, that's where all the fast food restaurants are. All of the ones along Hover, the ones just east of Maine on Highway 119, there's many, many, many of them. So of course, one would think that it would be fine to put a fast food drive-through restaurant on this site because it's the same designation as those existing conditions. So I don't have an issue with the conditional use per se, but only the fact that it's at this really bad intersection without good pedestrian access and with questionable traffic flow. And that's what I'm having trouble supporting. I use drive-through restaurants, and they're all over town in certain regional centers. So it's the appropriate zoning for it. I just think this particular site doesn't really work well. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions, comments? Anybody wants to make a motion? Anybody? Okay, just to try to keep things moving along here, and let me get back to my agenda here. I'm going to make a motion that we approve PZR 2024-3A. Is there a second? Commissioner Tedda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Jane, let's go ahead and take a vote.
Commissioner Height?
Nay.
Commissioner Tedda?
Yay.
Commissioner Boone? No. Chair Poland?
Yay.
Commissioner Flagg?
No.
Commissioner Kohler? Nay. Commissioner Popkin?
Nay.
Chair Poland, that motion fails 5-2.
Okay.
5.
So that motion failed. Does anybody want to make another motion? Commissioner Height.
Strong armed me into it. I would like to propose approval of PZR 20243C, which is denial of this application.
We have a motion for the 2024 3C. Is there a second?
Yes.
Commissioner Flagg.
I second.
Okay. Jane, let's take a vote. Oh. Sure.
Had a comment or a question about the motion and the intent there. Would we ask it now or after the
You
vote?
could ask it now. Once it's been seconded, you can go ahead.
Great. Fantastic. Thank you, Chair. I've appreciated the Commission's comments on my perhaps existential question about whether this makes sense in a regional center, and generally understand that it seems to. I might not like that per se, but that seems to be what is here. I do hear what Commissioner Flagg and Commissioner Height raised, and I'm wondering if a rejection is the appropriate action here. And it might sound like I'm bringing up something from an approach that we took last year, but would, if these are two addressable concerns, is tabling this and allowing the applicant to address some of the concerns that have been raised, particularly on the finer points. I think, I don't want to mischaracterize, but some of the points raised by my fellow commissioners. Is that a more appropriate action for an applicant that otherwise has tried to follow the procedures stated? So I will just pose the question in case the motioner and the seconder would like to reconsider.
I think I'll go to Commissioner Height. If your issue was that the drawing was not on the final plat, but on the preliminary, is that your major bone of contention?
I would say that was nothing more than conjecture on my part. I have no idea how this plan got together, but the plan doesn't match the plat.
Is that your bone of contention, that the two don't match?
That is my primary bone of contention.
Okay. Commissioner Flagg, would you like to add anything?
Well, plus Commissioner Height's main bone of contention, I really do feel that the site needs to be a little better put together because, and I don't feel that I need to redraw it, because I think that there's not enough room on the site to accomplish everything that needs to be accomplished on that site. So, to me, they'll have to do more than just go back and play with how it works there. I'm not sure what they'll have to do, but I
Well-
think just tabling it doesn't get to where it needs to be.
So, okay, that's what I want to hear. Just tabling wouldn't be.
I don't think that works.
Commissioner Kolar.
Is this on? Am I good?
Yep.
Yeah, I second what Commissioner Flake said. My concerns, I don't think can be addressed by just revisiting the plat or using the right terminology on the plat. My bigger concerns are what impacts this development, particularly a drive-through with all this additional traffic, what that might impact, how that might impact the other parcels proposed for development in this area, particularly if it wasn't contemplated originally to have this kind of traffic flow in this location.
Okay. If there are no other comments, let's go take a vote on PZR 2024-3C.
Commissioner Height? Aye. Commissioner Tetta?
Nay.
Commissioner Boone? Aye. Chair Poland?
Nay.
Commissioner Flake?
Aye.
Commissioner Kohler? Aye. Commissioner Popkin? Chairman, that resolution passes 4-3.
Okay, thank you very much. This item now, I'd still read the. This item now enters a 7-day appeal period. During this time, any aggrieved party may appeal the commission's decision by submitting a written appeal letter stating why the Planning and Zoning Commission's decision should be amended or reversed by the City Council. All appeals must be in writing and must be received in the city clerk's office and the planning office within the 7-day appeal period. The appeal period begins Thursday, June 27th at 8 a.m. and it ends Wednesday, July 3rd at 5 p.m. Thank you, Kristen. Thank you, applicant. Thank you, Grant, and everybody else for your time on this. Are we ready to go to the next item, or do we need anybody need any few minutes for anything? Nope. Let's keep going then. Okay, the next item is the Modern West 2 Concept Plan Amendment. Jennifer Hewitt Epperson, Planning and Development Services, presenting. Sure.
Good evening, members of the commission. If you wouldn't mind giving me one moment so I can just get everything pulled up. That is not the right presentation. One moment. Sorry about that. Just had to find a few things on there. Good evening, members of the commission. Jennifer Hewitt Apperson, Principal Planner with City of Longmont Development Services Division. I'm going to be talking to you tonight about a proposed concept plan amendment for property known as Modern West 2. Just a note, I'm going to be going into a fair amount of detail given the regulatory history of this and adjacent properties, as well as concern raised by one of our referral agencies. So hopefully I can answer any questions that you may have up front, and we'll go from there. So this particular property consists of a little more than 27 acres in West Longmont. It is south of Rogers Road, east of Airport Road, and west of Anderson Street, and it's southeast of the Vance Brand Airport. This represents the second phase of the Modern West development that is directly to the south of this particular property. It is this kind of, we'll call it the frying pan parcel. That is the Modern West 1 property. So this property is part of a larger area that is zoned for mixed-use employment. There are a mix of residential zoning districts in the vicinity as well as a number of unincorporated county parcels. However, much of what you do see that is incorporated within this immediate area is going to be mixed-use employment. This area is designated mixed-use employment in Envision Longmont, and there is a strip of the Niwot Ditch and some other greenways that do run through this area, so you do have that portion that is designated for parks, greenways, and open space throughout this area. In addition to the MUE land, there are a variety of residential designations in the vicinity, as well as a small piece of neighborhood commercial, some primary employment uses, as well as the Vance Brand Airport and a larger area of parks, greenways, and open space to the north that is presently unincorporated Boulder County, but it is designated for permanent land preservation. So additionally, this property is located within what's identified as an area of change in, I just identified an Envision Longmont, which in this particular case means that it's an undeveloped area planned for future development. So as I noted before, this particular project consists of 27 plus acres that are proposed for development with a mix of high-density residential uses and commercial industrial uses. The Niwot Ditch bisects this property, and a primary greenway will be built along it as part of the city's larger greenway network. So a concept plan amendment is required for this particular development because this property is a piece of the larger Schlegel-Williams annexation that was adopted in the year 2000 and has a concept plan that reflects the comprehensive plan and zoning code of the time and currently does not permit the kind of mixed-use development that is proposed here. So in terms of the proposed concept plan, as I indicated, this is a portion of the Schlegel-Williams annexation. It encompasses around a quarter of that larger annexation. This particular plan under consideration would include a mix of high-density residential uses as well as commercial industrial uses consistent with the underlying MUE zoning district, as well as that greenway property and any necessary outlots and such for drainage, right-of-way, for roadway, etc. Access would be provided from Rogers Road to the north, as well as a future extension of the Mountain Brook Drive to the south. That particular road, Mountain Brook Drive, that extension is being built as part of the Modern West 1 project. So I'll talk a little bit more about that momentarily. So the commercial industrial parcel of Modern West 2, which is the darker blue on this map, would basically be located north of one of the commercial parcels within the Modern West 1 property, as I mentioned, would be separated by this future Mountain Brook Drive extension. Extension of Anderson Street would be required as part of this project, and additionally, bicycle and pedestrian connections will be provided throughout the property to connect with adjacent roadways, development, as well as the greenway. So just an overview of the permissible uses within the MUE category. These are the permissible uses that are primary uses. So it's basically a range of commercial and employment type uses, as well as some supporting uses like hotels, some food and beverage, professional services, etc., some healthcare and such. Secondary uses in MUE include residential uses at greater than 18 units per acre, restaurants, some general retail, various types of storage, such as including self-storage and boat and RV storage, both of which you do see in this general area. So our longstanding policy is that secondary uses may comprise no more than 50% of a contiguous area of a given zoning district or Envision Longmont designation. So given the number of unincorporated properties in this general vicinity, in this area of MUE, we are using the Envision Longmont designation to make that calculation, since those unincorporated properties are designated for MUE within Envision Longmont. So this area does currently contain a number of secondary uses, largely storage types. There are a couple self-storage facilities. There's a boat and RV storage facility. It's not near the 50% threshold at this point, and the proposed residential uses, which would constitute a secondary use, would not cause this area to exceed that 50% threshold. If approved as proposed, Modern West would basically result in approximately 34% of this land area occupied by secondary uses. So just in terms of regulatory history, I touched on this a little bit already. This property is part of the larger Schlegel-Williams annexation. That annexation agreement and concept plan amendment is included in your packet. It was finalized in 2000. It consists of about 107 acres, and this property, again, represents about a quarter of that particular annexation. The approved concept plan for this annexation permitted industrial economic development uses consistent with that business light industrial zoning district that was in effect at the time. So this zoning district did not permit residential uses at all. It was strictly a single business industrial employment type zoning district. So since then, we have shifted towards a mixed use approach that allows for a greater variety of land uses within these former BLI areas. So in addition to establishing the permissible uses, this concept plan adopted in 2000 does include a lot of the elements that you do see in the proposed concept plan. It provided for a primary greenway along the Niwot Ditch, and that would have required 50-foot setbacks from the center line of the ditch, as well as a future 100-foot wide airport emergency landing easement that pretty much is on the portion of the annexation that is not on the subject property. To date, there haven't been any amendments to this concept plan for this property or for any part of the Schlegel-Williams annexation. So this is the first time that we're seeing any proposed concept plan amendments or amendments to that annexation agreement for that particular property. So this concept plan amendment represents the second phase of the property immediately to the south, known as Modern West 1. That property was annexed as part of a separate annexation in 2019. That property, they amended the concept plan for that in 2000. Which permits basically a mix of industrial, commercial, and high-density residential uses over approximately 16 acres. This commission approved a preliminary plat for that particular project in early 2022. That project is currently undergoing site plan review, final plat, public improvement plan review for the first filing of that project. So it is currently moving through subsequent stages of the development review process. So in terms of our DRC process, a little error here, that pre-application meeting was held in November of 2022. We did hold a neighborhood meeting in February of 23. We did not have any members of the public participate. The application was submitted in early March, has been under review by the DRC and referral agencies. That submittal included a number of supporting technical documents, including your standard traffic impact study, various environmental studies, drainage studies, acoustic analysis, etc. So now for the fun stuff. So this project, I will say this project has spent longer in the development review process than most other projects of this nature would have, and that was due to some comments that we received really as a surprise out of the blue from the FAA. We hadn't received any comments like this before. So I want to talk a little bit about the airport proximity concerns. So As part of their application, the applicant did submit an airspace acoustic analysis that demonstrated that the project was consistent with FAA noise standards. They also submitted what's known as a 7460 letter from the FAA Southwest Regional Office indicating that the proposed Modern West 2 concept plan amendment with residential and commercial and industrial uses would not present hazards to air navigation. So following that, the first submittal, the initial submittal of this project, the initial review of this project, staff received a letter dated June 13th, 2023 from the FAA Denver Airport District's office, different office, stating their objection to the proposed residential uses given their proximity to Vance Brand Airport. So as I noted, this is the first time that the city of Longmont has ever received such a letter about land use compatibility. It's the first time we've heard from the Denver District Office. We've never received any sort of comment of this nature from the FAA regarding proposed developments near Vance Brand Airport. In fact, if you look at the zoning maps and the various development maps in this vicinity, there have been quite a few development projects in the vicinity of the Modern West 2 project that did in fact that were in fact for residential developments, and we did not get this objection then. So it's our understanding that recent issues with the Rocky Mountain Airport in Jefferson County are really the impetus for this letter. And other local governments, specifically the town of Erie, have received similar letters as well. So as I mentioned, coordination with the FAA, we had numerous meetings with the FAA to try to resolve their concerns, and that added quite a bit of time to the review process. So, where we are now is the concept plan amendment you're looking at now really is the genesis of a lot of discussion from a larger policy standpoint and how we can move forward. So again, we had extensive discussions between the city staff and the FAA over their land use compatibility concerns. This property is located in what is known as the Airport Influence Overlay, or AIO zone, that encompasses a really significant portion of the west side of Longmont. The AIO section of the Land Development Code does not explicitly define airport compatible uses beyond things like electromagnetic interference, wildlife attractants, and lighting that would interfere with navigation. It also doesn't differentiate between different parts of the of the AIO, so there are no subzones. It's just one very large area, and I'll bring up a map here momentarily. So the subject property is near the runway approach zone, which is what raised objections from the FAA. So staff and the applicant have worked to apply recommended standards contained in an FAA advisory circular that the Denver District Office did provide us to restrict residential uses in the portion of the site nearest to the runway approach zone. It's staff's opinion that the concept plan amendment under consideration that has been revised based on these discussions is a reasonable compromise that addresses the concerns raised by the FAA while ensuring that the applicant has an economically viable project and also ensures that we can make some progress towards addressing Longmont's housing shortage. Let's see. So essentially, I'm going to provide a little bit more context for you here. So to provide larger context, the red oval, this giant red oval on the map, that is the AIO. That is the Airport Influence Zone. It encompasses basically the entire west side of Longmont. And it also does not include any differentiation as far as subzones within the oval. It encompasses more than 9 square miles of the western portion of the Longmont planning area, and really includes some of the few remaining undeveloped properties we have in the city of Longmont that aren't encumbered by conservation type restrictions or floodplains. So it's really one of the few developable areas we have left in the city of Longmont. So discussions with the FAA, our attorneys, the city manager's office, really made it clear that we need to take another look at the AIO zone and its provisions in the Land Development Code and consider some amendments that would add more specificity to this section. We have had initial discussions with City Council at a study session on this issue, and we will be bringing a set of proposed amendments forward in the future. I don't have a time frame for that, but it's something that we are moving forward with. That said, we don't have any of those amendments in place, so the current code requirements will apply to the Modern West 2 proposal. One other thing to note is that an navigation easement and other disclosures to the property buyers and tenants relating to airport activity will be required for Modern West 2. This type of disclosure was actually a requirement of the original Schlegel-Williams annexation agreement as well. So this is not a surprise. It's been on the books. We will have these notifications and disclosures that, in case you didn't notice the planes flying nearby, you're close to an airport. So now I'm just going to do a quick overview of the review criteria. That's probably more information than you wanted to know on the regulatory context and everything. So let's dive into the meat here. So the proposed concept plan amendment is consistent with the policy and growth framework of Envision Longmont, as well as the mixed-use employment district. Specific goal and policy references are included as part of the staff communication in your packet, so I'm not going to go through those here. So the original approved concept plan does encompass a larger area. It predates the current code and comp plan. The applicant proposes a mixed-use development that incorporates commercial industrial uses, high-density residential uses, and a primary greenway, all of which are permitted to some degree within the underlying MUE zoning district. Adequate public facilities exist or will be provided here. The developer will be responsible for providing necessary infrastructure to serve this project, including an extension of Anderson Street. Given that this is a concept plan, specific street and utility design and layout isn't yet known, and these details would be evaluated as part of future development review processes if this concept plan amendment is approved. So the surrounding properties do generally share the same MUE zoning or Envision Longmont designation. At this time, a lot of those properties are undeveloped. So, the applicant and the city staff, we've worked together to establish a concept plan that addresses the concerns of the biggest nearby land user, which would be the airport. So the proposed development will include construction of a primary greenway segment that would be dedicated to the city of Longmont, as well as necessary road and infrastructure improvements. There are similarly zoned properties in the vicinity as well, and also a number of, there's a variety of uses in the immediate vicinity also. So the property is not within an identified stream or creek corridor or riparian area. All required setbacks from the Niwot ditch would be met. The proposed concept plan includes existing and future right-of-way and access points for roadways identified in Envision Longmont. Multimodal connections, including primary greenway trail along the Niwot ditch, are also shown. Access points, internal linkages, circulation will be further defined as part of future development applications, assuming approval of the concept plan. So, almost done. In addition to the criteria for all application types, concept plans and their amendments shall meet the following standards established in Section 1502.060A. So in this case, the concept plan, as mentioned, is a high-level plan that does not include the level of detail that would be contained in subsequent development applications, such as a preliminary plat. The proposed plan does include provisions for multimodal access, for bicycle pedestrian connections, future road connections as well. So we've talked about the FAA concerns, any mitigation efforts, any mitigation of any impacts on adjacent owners or adjacent properties would have to meet the standards within the Land Development Code. we've tried to balance the needs of, our city in terms of its severe housing shortage, concerns about airport proximity. So we really have been working to see how we can minimize any potential impacts while serving all of our needs as well. And in terms of environmental mitigation, a species habitat conservation plan was submitted and reviewed as part of this application. Recommendations of this plan will be followed throughout the development process. Additional environmental issues and conservation measures may be identified as part of future development review processes. So finally, in conclusion, staff recommends approval of the concept plan amendment for Modern West 2. The applicant did make revisions to the concept plan in response to FAA and staff concerns and has demonstrated that they will take steps to mitigate impacts of development. Future users, including prospective owners and tenants of the proposed development, would receive notice that they are near the airport and therefore may experience such impacts. So those disclosures would be provided as part of any future development activities on this property. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Margaret Frund, who is going to be speaking on behalf of the applicant team. Just click and scroll.
Click and scroll.
And then lower this.
Hi, Brad. Good evening, members of Planning and Zoning Commission. My name is Margaret Freund, and I am one of the owners and developers of Modern West. Our consultant was prepared this presentation and was going to present it, but she had a family emergency, and I took the role over today, so please forgive me. I'm likely to stumble through some things, and I will apologize in advance for the short amount of time I had to prepare. And we are appreciative of the opportunity to present. A lot of what you're going to see in our presentation is going to mirror what Jennifer has told you. We have been working on this for quite a while and working closely with staff along the way. So this is the site for Modern West 2, as you can see, and as Jennifer pointed out. Let's just go on. That's Modern West 1, so the blue outline. And Modern West 2 is proposed to be mixed use, so it'll have commercial, industrial, and residential. And Modern West 1 is an approved and platted mixed use project. These two parcels are envisioned to work together as a larger community, and the idea is to create synergy between them with mixed uses on both sites so that they really can sort of act as one neighborhood. There we go. As Jennifer pointed out, this was part of a 1998 Schlegel-Williams annexation concept plan, and that precedes the current land use designations and zoning that are in place today. And you can see that this is a larger parcel than our parcel. And this is the area that's included in the concept plan amendment that we have before you today. The key points I'd like to raise are, first of all, the primary greenway. It's as currently identified in this original concept plan is not going to be amended, and it's continuing into this concept plan amendment. It's incorporated in Modern West 2 development, and it's ensuring consistency with the original plan, and it will be dedicated to the city.
There's a 100-foot airport emergency landing easement you can see in the left corner there, and that also remains a requirement and will be dedicated to the city. And there's a 50-foot building setback on either side of that. The proposed amendment seeks to permit a full range of uses allowed within the mixed-use employment zoning district, and this concept plan change aims to enhance the flexibility and adaptability of this site to current market demands and community needs. This plan represents the second phase, again, of a two-phase project, of which Modern West 1 is the first phase, and it envisions a diverse range of residential, commercial, light industrial uses, fostering, as I said, a vibrant and dynamic community. And we believe this concept plan amendment will facilitate continued growth and development of the area while adhering to established guidelines and enhancing the community overall functionality. So here is the concept plan diagram, and it's located in an area of change, as Jennifer said. It's a proposed mix of primary and secondary uses on the property. You can see the light blue area is designated for high-density residential uses, and the dark blue is commercial, and the outlots are going to be a combination. The bright green is the greenway along the Niwot Ditch, which is going to have a multi-use path that will connect to the Likens Gulch path, and the outlots will serve water quality. There'll be parks, there'll be access, there'll be landscaping, and things like that. The Modern West 2 Concept Plan Amendment is consistent with Envision Longmont's goals to promote a sustainable mix of uses in the city of Longmont. It complies with Policy 1.2A, and which states that the city should strive for a balanced mix of residential, employment, retail, commercial, and recreational and other uses. It complies with Policy 1.2F and supports higher density housing types in MUE and other mixed-use areas. And it complies with Policy 1.2G and encourages the integration of complementary land uses on the same site. Modern West 2 proposes a mix of residential, recreational, and commercial and industrial uses in the MUE zoning. The proposed plan would further complement the previously approved Modern West 1 mixed-use development to the south. It's a second phase, as I mentioned, and Modern West 1, as Jennifer mentioned, is currently in site plan, public improvement plans, and plat review, which, again, it's also a mixed-use development with all these mixtures of uses. The proposed plan includes a future greenway along the Niwot Ditch as part of the city's primary greenway network, identified within Envision Longmont. The proposed Modern West 2 development would construct a portion of the primary greenway identified in Envision Longmont along the Niwot Ditch that connects the Likens Gulch Greenway. The greenway would be 100 feet in width, a 50-foot setback from the center line of the ditch on either side that would be dedicated to the city. And as Jennifer mentioned, the proposed concept plan amendment has been reconfigured to address the FAA land use compatibility concerns. We work with staff to apply recommended standards contained in the FAA advisory circular to restrict residential uses in a portion of the site nearest the runway approach zone to non-residential. And the staff has indicated the concept amendment presented here represents a reasonable compromise that balances FAA concerns with the city's housing needs and the ability to have a viable project. Saying a little more about airport landing stuff. If you can see here, to the left, the green area is the actual airport, the existing runway protection zone. And you can see that there's a 300-foot navigation easement and a planned 100-foot emergency landing easement, which we're going to be installing with Mountain Brook, and then the 50-foot building setback on either side. As mentioned, an aeronautical study was completed for the site, ensuring through examination and consideration all the relevant factors. And we do have from the FAA a letter stating determination of no hazard to air navigation, confirming that the proposed amendment poses no risk to air traffic and navigation. By incorporating these points, we ensure that the proposed concept plan amendment is comprehensive, adheres to safety regulations, and aligns with both current and future development needs. So this gives you kind of a good vision of where the site sits in relation to other parts of Longmont. As you can see here, the bright green is how the bike paths and pedestrian ways are connected. Along the Niwot Ditch to the Likens Gulch, the bike path back to East Longmont, and then a greenway down through Modern West 1 to the south, which there's going to be a water line installed that's twice the size of the water line that we need, so that it can accommodate future development. And these pathways that we've created will also connect to the future bus rapid transit there, just at the bottom right of the screen. This map shows you, as Jennifer pointed out, the contiguous land area that's designated MUE. I know there are a lot of conversations about secondary uses in the MUE, so we wanted to give you a visual explanation of what this area encompasses. It's 238.41 acres. There we go. As pointed out, the Planning and Development Services policy states that secondary uses cannot exceed 50% of the land area within any given contiguous area that shares a specific zoning and comprehensive plan designation. So this entire 230-acre parcel is the area that, under the current policies, shouldn't exceed 50% of secondary uses. So unincorporated Boulder County makes up 13.6%. So as Jennifer pointed out, these are designated MUE, but they are not yet annexed. Existing non-residential uses which is storage and self-storage and RV storage, that's 12.1%. And some of those were pre-existing uses before the zoning was changed and Envision Longmont happened, so they were brought in and made secondary uses as part of that process. Let's see, there's 27, so as you can see there, existing approved residential uses are 35.55 acres up in, whoops, can I go back? Nope. Okay, well, anyway. The secondary use of residential for the whole area right now is 15.4%, 35.55 acres. The existing and approved secondary uses make up 27.5% of the MUE area. So despite these existing secondary uses, the area has not yet reached the 50%. The proposed Modern West There we go. One more. Two more. There we go. The proposed Modern West residential secondary use is 15.53 acres. And I want to point out that those residential uses are flanking that beautiful Niwot Greenway that's going to be improved with a path, and it will have a connector between them that goes across the Greenway as well. And that's 6.7% of the MU8 area. So even with the residential that we're proposing, which is a secondary use on this concept plan amendment, the secondary use total in this whole area is still only 34.23%. And here's a table that basically says everything I just said on the maps. So that should help you one way or the other, depending on what your visual preference is, to follow our math, hopefully. And there you have the sum, 34.23%. And the Modern West 2 Concept Plan Amendment is consistent with the required Longmont Municipal Code criteria. Adequate utilities are or will be provided for Modern West 1 and 2, consistent with Envision Longmont and mixed-use employment zoning. Collaboration with city staff ensures airport compatibility, includes a primary greenway segment and essential infrastructure improvements, and meets all required setbacks from the Niwot Ditch and Likens Gulch Greenway. So that's our presentation, and we also have our aviation counsel here today who's going to just introduce himself and offer to walk you through any of the technical aspects and the letter of no hazard. And I'll be back to do my little 3-minute thing that I was originally going to do in a few minutes. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I'm Mike Morgan, 950 South Cherry, Suite 300, Denver 80246. I'm an attorney and I represent Modern West with respect to aviation issues. I come at this from the perspective of having represented general aviation and commercial service airports for 40 years now, so I'm just about ready to retire. You have in your packet the determination letter from FAA finding that this project poses no hazards to air navigation. In the staff report, it's also mentioned that we've established that this project is outside the 65 LDN noise contour FAA establishes as being inconsistent with residential land uses. So we've cleared that bar by a good hurdle. And finally, the staff has indicated, as both have indicated, this project has been modified to address FAA's concerns regarding land use compatibility. In short, this project complies with all applicable FAA regulations and advisory circulars. Your staff report covers this very well. I'm really just here to answer any questions you might have regarding FAA regulations as it pertains to this project. So I'd be happy to answer those now or later in the evening if they come up. Thank you.
Yeah, later in the evening, we'll have a chance to ask questions.
Members of Planning and Zoning Commission, my name is Derek Gracio, and I live at 6185 Brigadoon Court in Longmont. I've been working on the Modern West project since 2016 and was a stakeholder during the public engagement process for Envision Longmont, which was adopted in 2016. At annexation, I committed to extending Mountain Brook Drive past our property to Rogers Road, including an emergency landing area west of our property for Vance Brand Airport. I also committed to building a new local street perpendicular to Mountain Brook along the west border of our Modern West site. This street will provide access and services to the neighboring properties to the west and southwest of us. Along with streets, we are obligated to bring in utilities, which are upsized to accommodate future development and planning that is highlighted in Envision Longmont. These are all significant and costly commitments made to align with the city's larger vision of this area. Over the last 7 years, I've consistently worked closely with planning staff to align Modern West with Envision Longmont's goals, providing a mix of uses, including a variety of residential offerings. Since its conception, Modern West has been committed to sustainable development, including the use of solar photovoltaic, all-electric residential, car and bike charging, shared parking, enhanced multimodal site planning, and the design of water quality and stormwater facilities to support multiple uses as pocket parks. We will also be developing and dedicating, as mentioned, a primary greenway along the Niwot Ditch, including a multi-use path connecting to Likens Gulch and St. Vrain Greenway. These substantial investments will help further connect this area of Longmont, and will contribute to the city's long-term sustainability goals. Our Modern West sites integrate well together and provide a unique opportunity to blend living, working, gathering, and recreating. Our planning process has taken many years, but we've stayed focused on successful placemaking to create a vibrant, mixed-use, mixed-income community. We recognize that it's important to create a balance of jobs and housing within our MUE zoning district, so we are planning our land uses to be less than 50% residential. Even in our post-pandemic environment, where it is exceedingly difficult to bring a commercial project to fruition. The residential uses in the MUE district are important to allow owners and renters to be near the newly created opportunities for employment, reducing the carbon impact of traveling to work while utilizing the surrounding open space and trail networks around our property to enhance the lived experience. Our sites have great connectivity through trail networks to city open space and nature areas, to downtown Longmont, to major retail zones, and all the way east to Sandstone Park. We're also steps away from the newly proposed rapid transit stop at Nelson and Airport, and our renters and owners will easily be able to connect to the future Highway 119 bike path, which will start at Airport Road and head west. Our sites are very well suited for residential use and alternative modes of transportation. In 2022, I began to focus my efforts more on affordable and attainable housing to help address the workforce housing shortages in Longmont. I brought on my partner, Margaret Freud, who has extensive experience in developing communities with an emphasis on mixed use and mixed income housing, both in Boulder County and in the state of Virginia. Margaret and I have committed to build the 12% required affordable housing on site at Modern West 2. We are in discussions with Habitat for Humanity to help diversify the housing types at Modern West 2 and support Habitat's great work in the community. Thank you for your consideration tonight. Margaret has a few things to share as well.
Hi, me again. My name is Margaret Freund. Members of the Planning and Zoning Board, we are grateful for your attention and patience with us. And I'm Derek's partner on Modern West at Rogers Road in Longmont. I have a small development company that specializes in adaptive reuse of historic structures and mixed use, mixed income development. And we work in Colorado and Virginia. We recently completed a project in Virginia that is mixed use, mixed income, and includes new construction and the restoration of a 108-year-old former school building. In that project, residents ranging in income levels from 50 to 150% AMI live alongside offices, art studios, a market cafe, and a ceramics lab. We are currently working on a mixed income project in Virginia requiring a maximum of 80% AMI for 30% of the units, and with Flatirons Habitat in Boulder to provide as much for sale permanently restricted attainable housing as already exists in Boulder. The Envision Longmont public process led to the rezoning of an area that includes Modern West to mixed, and it changed the zoning to mixed-use employment. This zoning was designed to encourage a mixture of uses so that people can live in proximity to employment and retail amenities. Mixed use helps create vibrant neighborhoods, but can also come with challenges when trying to design for uses that have a synergistic rather than an antagonistic relationship. When this area was rezoned MUE, office use was a likely and compatible primary use that is no longer viable due to the pandemic. So it's no wonder the other sites seeking entitlement in this MUE zone are all seeking solely residential. We continue to master plan a mixture of uses to create healthy community, and we are the only development so far to propose a true mix of uses. With the rapid growth along the Front Range, everyone is aware that there's a need for housing in this area, and Longmont is no exception. Specifically, attainable and affordable housing are ever more difficult to find for the young families and working folks who want to live in Longmont. There is strong community benefit in providing mixed housing types and affordability in areas like Modern West that connect to open space, bike paths, and mass transit near jobs and services. With our concept plan amendment, we have committed to providing all of the required inclusionary housing on site, and we've had discussions with both St. Vrain Habitat and Flatirons Habitat to explore partnerships for both affordable and attainable housing. As Derek mentioned, this development will provide significant investment in infrastructure to fulfill the transportation and development needs of future MUE projects beyond Modern West and supports the master plan while employing many approaches to enhance sustainability. Add to that the chance to see this much-needed housing alongside businesses and employment opportunities, and we hope you agree. This is exactly what Envision Longmont imagined here. We respectfully ask that you vote to approve our concept amendment without conditions.
Thank you. Next, this is a public item, and next is public invited to be heard. Are we ready to move forward, or do we need any time?
I could use time.
Okay, let's really try to hold this to 5 minutes, and we'll come back at 9:25. Okay. We're ready to get going again. This is a public hearing item, and as such, we give the public a chance to comment. They get up to 5 minutes. We just ask that you give your name and your address for the record. We have several people who have signed up, and then after they signed up, we will open up in case anybody wants to make further comments. First on the list is Dan Sorrells.
Thank you, members of the Planning and Zoning Commission. My name is Dan Sorrells, and I live at 328 Grant Street here in Longmont. And I'm here to support approval of the Modern West 2 Concept Plan Amendment. I'm familiar with this area using the nearby open space just north of this parcel, both as a walking path and as a birding area, good birding. And as I've walked along, I've long thought this area was surprisingly undeveloped, even though it's located near the Vance Brand Airport. Initially, this area seemed to me to suggest some sort of commercial use would likely go in. However, through my day job, which requires me to closely monitor the commercial real estate market and the supply-demand conditions, I'm well aware that nearly all commercial real estate right now is overbuilt and will be for some time. For instance, there's been a net outflow of industrial tenants in Longmont since 2020, causing vacancy rates to rise. This is due in part to a lot of recent construction, but also slowing demand. Traditional office is even in worse shape, as I'm sure everyone knows, as the effects of the COVID recession continues to echo. This brings me to why I support this amendment. We clearly don't need a whole lot more industrial or traditional office space. What we do need is a lot more housing that is both attainable and flexible to take advantage of the evolving way we do business. Though I'm not here on behalf of Longmont Housing, I am a member. Launch has been actively advocating for more affordable and attainable housing in Longmont, something that is, I think everyone agrees, sorely needed. One of the problems is that there is less and less land available for additional residential, particularly on the lower and more affordable end of home prices. As I read through the packet for tonight's meeting, I noted that the developer's concept plan conforms with Envision Longmont comprehensive plan, something that they've definitely underlined tonight. It will be more mixed use, but in the best sense, offering a combination of living and working in the same area. It will have easy access to the green space and trails that connect or will soon connect to large areas of Longmont, reducing the need for more cars and more traffic. And I understand that should this plan amendment be approved, the developer intends to waive the inclusionary housing fee in lieu. I think he just mentioned that. Meaning Modern West would have actual affordable housing. I do understand that users of Vance Brand Airport are concerned about this development. Interestingly, I came across a 2018 study on the airport influence area for the Northern Colorado Regional Airport, which found that noise from the airport had not deterred residential development in any significant way. I can't imagine why it would be any different here in Longmont. We now have the opportunity to add quality and affordable housing to the Longmont stock. And I applaud the developer and his team's vision for this site. I urge you all to approve this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the list is Drew Sorrells.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Drew Sorrells, and I live at 328 Grant Street here in Longmont. I'm here to support the Phase 2 of the proposed development by Modern West, aimed at providing much-needed affordable housing in near Longmont's airport. Phase 2 of this project is meticulously designed to meet FAA noise standards, ensuring a safe living environment. The project site lies outside of the airport's noise contour, making it compatible for residential use. At a recent city council meeting spoken by a city council member, I heard that the city of Longmont is capable of deciding and gets to decide the highest and best use for its own city and is not controlled by the FAA, of course, with your approval. In addition, Envision Longmont, our city's comprehensive plan, supports the proposed mixed-use zoning MUE, which seamlessly blends employment and high-density residential uses. This development will feature a significant number of housing units in Phase 2 and will offer a lower density feel with more open space than required by code. It aligns with the vision for a thriving, inclusive community that supports diverse age groups and abilities, allowing opportunity for aging in place. I drive by this neighborhood along Rogers Road, west of Hover, on my way to work every day, and notice the already nice mix of housing types which have considered inclusivity by embracing a veterans community, a farm stand, farmland, a veteran clinic practicing at home, serving many surrounding families and their pets, and lots of bikeways and open space. If Phase 2 is not approved, the alternative would be industrial buildings surrounding this already very residential feel along Rogers Road, and would be less compatible with our community's long-term goals. The proposed residential development fosters a mixed-use environment, enhancing livability and community spirit. While noise complaints are a concern, studies show that noise levels in this project area are below thresholds that would disrupt residential living. Additionally, most people are away from their homes during the day, minimizing exposure to potential disturbances. The broader impact on Longmont is significant. This project will attract diverse residents and foster a vibrant community, contributing to economic growth. The argument that residential development poses more risk than commercial properties is mitigated by the fact that commercial properties with many employees operate mainly during the day. In conclusion, Phase 2 of the Modern West project adheres to all FAA noise standards, height regulations, and zoning laws, ensuring compatibility with Vance Brand Airport. As a committed resident of the Longmont community, I support this project for its potential to blend different types of people, ages, and abilities, promoting inclusive and sustainable growth. Your approval of Phase 2 will bring this vision to life and contribute positively to our city's future. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Next up is Shaquille Dalal.
Shaquille Dalal, 219 Francis Street. Commissioners, I have a comment about a detail in your communication form. In the middle of page 3, just above the section titled Alignment with the Envision Longmont Comprehensive Plan, it says that because Modern West 2 is in the airport influence zone, this development has, quote, further locational restrictions for residential uses in response to concerns about airport compatibility. As a pro-housing advocate, I'm going to chafe against any restrictions to build housing unless I see that they have a well-justified basis. For too long, cities in the United States have overly restricted the construction of many different types of housing, and it's resulted in a nationwide housing affordability crisis that I know that you know about. I disagree with the idea that it is appropriate to restrict the layout of this development on the basis of the FAA's supposed concerns about compatibility. I read the entire 175-page airport circular. There is nothing in there that requires the prohibition of residential development in that area. Based on the record of the FAA sending letters to other cities in Colorado about developments that are multiple miles away, I don't personally find the FAA's objections credible. I think that the FAA is just scared of noise complaints and is bureaucratically telling Longmont to get off their lawn. I also spoke on this topic at the City Council study session that was referenced earlier. Listening to City Council members discuss this issue, I did not hear support for the idea that the Longmont should do what the FAA says. What I heard was skepticism about the FAA interfering with the principle of local control and no direction from Council to bring in an ordinance restricting residential development in this area. I do not think that it is a good precedent to hold applicants to something that is not a law or likely to become a law. The FAA has issued a letter of no hazard, saying that nothing in this development is a hazard to the functionality or safety of the airport. As you know, in response to resident interest in the city of Longmont has conducted multiple noise studies of the airport and repeatedly demonstrated that the airport is far, far below the noise threshold that would suggest residential incompatibility. As a matter of principle, I believe that we should not restrict residential development any more than is actually required. And given that there is, to my knowledge, no basis in law for doing so here, I'm asking you not to.
Thank you very much. Next up is David Emerson.
Good evening, David Emerson, 1152 Twin Peaks Circle in Longmont, and I'm here tonight as the Executive Director for Habitat for Humanity of the St. Vrain Valley. So, one, we appreciate your consideration for this project and your past support for affordable home ownership efforts that have come before you. We're obviously here to express our support for the concept plan amendment for Modern West 2. In my capacity as executive director, I can attest to, but I'll try not to belabor, the well-documented need for affordable housing in this area. Lack of affordable housing has led to issues related to transportation and with hiring and retaining individuals that work as basic service providers. So at Habitat, we know across the state, and we certainly see that here, the number 1 and 2 industries in which our homeowners work are healthcare and education. So they are quite literally the basic service providers in our area. So this project represents an opportunity to construct housing on one of the few significant parcels that remain on the west side of the city. A parcel that complements public transportation. We've gone through a lot of that stuff. We've had extensive conversations with the applicant. It is certainly our hope that we would be a part of this development, but regardless, by being with inclusionary housing, they will have to account for affordable housing, and so that will help, and just the mere supply is something that will mitigate some of these issues. The last thing I would say is we do have 8 homes just to the southeast of this parcel. Those homeowners have been living in their homes for the last year. 2 of the 8 homeowners work for the school district, so very much a part of our basic service providers community, and they're ecstatic with the opportunity that they have to own a home, and have consistently communicated with how excited they are to be there. So again, we appreciate the considerations you have before you, but we would strongly encourage you to support this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is John Grunsfeld.
Hi, I'm John Grunsfeld. I'm actually a Boulder resident, 4879 Kings Ridge. And I've been following the Modern West 1 development since I started my business on the Longmont Airport about 4 years ago. I think the project is very meritorious with its goals, but I strongly urge the Commission to actually go out and stand on the Modern West 2 or Modern West 1 property on any given day to see how close aircraft are flying over the property. It's been represented here that the FAA is all agreeing on this. That's not the way the federal government works. I was a senior executive for NASA, working closely with the FAA for 25 years, and the FAA isn't proactive at looking at development. And I think, quite honestly, when you rezoned from light industrial, from industrial economic to multi-use, that the Planning Commission, no offense, and the City Council made a mistake with that particular zone. Now, there's plenty of houses all around the airport, and it's not a noise issue. It's not a safety issue. That safety compliance that you heard is a very narrow regulation that looks for radio aids to navigation interference by a development. This is a very narrow thing that the box has been checked. I would by no means read what I heard tonight as, that the FAA is comfortable with putting homes right on final approach to a runway, especially high-density housing. So I'm very concerned about that. I fly into runway 29, which is the approach that would fly right over Modern West, And a typical approach is, only 100 feet above these properties. When you look at the Jefferson County Rocky Mountain Regional Airport issue that's going on right now, I think it's a fair bet that Longmont will be engaged in litigation with the residents at Modern West 2 and Modern West 1 most likely down the road when families have turned over and a signature that says, oh, I recognize I'm near the airport isn't worth anything. I mean, all those Jefferson County folks that are suing the city for hundreds of millions of dollars have a similar signature, and it doesn't carry any legal weight. The lawsuit is still there. So I encourage you to look at that and think about whether we really want to put high-density housing right under final on that particular property. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all the people who have signed up. I will open up in case there's anybody else in the audience who would like to come up and speak for this issue. Seeing nobody coming forward, I'll go ahead and close out the public invited to be heard. We will now move to questions, comments from the commission. First up is Commissioner Flagg.
Thank you. Jennifer, could I ask you a couple questions that occurred to me? There are 3 outlots on this property, and I'm wondering, long-term, who will maintain those?
It would be a property owners association typically is who maintains those.
And will that I don't know if you would know this, will that information be in their deeds, or are these more rental properties?
So the outlots would be typically when we do plats, the outlots are platted and there's a note that they basically are owned by a property owners association who is responsible for the maintenance. So they aren't permitted to just kind of hang out there. There is a specific ownership for them.
And I fully understand
Okay.
that. I live in a place where there is such an outlet. But will there be something on those deeds to the adjacent houses in that HOA, or the apartments or condos or whatever is built there, to say that you are part of an HOA that has a responsibility to maintain this adjacent outlot?
I mean, there are typically HOA or property owner association disclosures as part of deeds, so I can't speak specifically to what this would look like. I don't know, Tim, if you have any thoughts, but it's, usually part of a standard disclosure that you're in an HOA or you have a property owners association, so.
The reason why I bring this up is because increasingly, cities are making use of these outlots. You have to have detention. You have to have somebody to maintain them. I understand fully what that means. However, many times when somebody has moved into an area, suddenly the HOA says, oh, we have this area we have to maintain, and it's not disclosed. So this seems like an ongoing thing that's going to happen. It happens all over our city. So is there a way that we can figure out how to inform people, either through their deeds or some kind of a legal thing? We should be telling these people, especially if it's an affordable product, this adds to their expense of an HOA.
So from a policy standpoint, I think that's something that would be more appropriately addressed at the time of platting. This is a concept plan,
I
so
understand. I
it's,
just wanted to.
yeah, so that's something that would be more appropriately addressed at the time of plat.
Okay, I'll try to remember that at that point. Also, how tall will these buildings be?
Don't have the exact dimensions at this point. Within the MUE zone, there is a height limit of 4 stories. Obviously, there are some considerations that would have to be made. I think the finding of no impact to air navigation does fall. That height limit does fall within that. So 4 stories is the maximum.
Okay, and is there some kind of an agreement or notification of what the traffic will be along the Rogers Road area? Because right now that's also a it's a very high-speed area. Is there a provision that the builder is going to be required to put in any kind of traffic mitigation, like narrowing down the lanes, of Rogers Road so that people have a clue that they need to slow down, because that does work. Maybe I should be asking Phil this.
I would say Phil and Josh are probably the best people to speak to about this. I will say that as part of this development, necessary improvements to Rogers Road would be made, appropriate traffic control would be installed, and it would really be based on the traffic studies that have been done to date and will be continue to be updated throughout the development review process.
I thought maybe we should ask Phil. We got a traffic engineer, not just a planner. Okay.
Hi, Steve Tuttle with the Fox Tuttle Transportation Group. And so the traffic study identified improvements. And in addition to, the roadway structure will be built out with mountain brooks, so there'll be additional ways in and out of the area. And then there's also a traffic signal proposed. It's currently under design at Rogers and the main intersection there. that'll provide
Anderson?
access, at Rogers and
Airport.
and Airport. Yeah.
At Airport. Yeah, that's needing one now already, actually. It's kind of a dicey situation. You have a big truck turning right. But I'm concerned with the impact of the existing traffic. Is there going to be some way to mitigate? Right now, the speed limit, I think, out there for the most part is 35 miles an hour. So are there any thoughts to doing things like traffic islands or bulb outs at intersections? Some way of getting traffic to have a clue that they need to slow down, because I notice you're also going to have a trail going across there. These are kind of things that if we could plan from the get-go, then everybody becomes aware that this is a low traffic area, their residential development. I mean, there are already residents along Rogers Road that are affected by the traffic.
I think it's an excellent point, and I know that the project team will continue to work with the city in identifying this kind of off-site improvements and things that even that maybe not directly related to mitigating the impacts of this project, things that can be done in the area. Certainly having the traffic signal there is going to impact speeds, could potentially impact speed limits, and working with the city and how those might be adjusted to match sort of the growing traffic and growing infrastructure.
What is the warrant required for such a light at Anderson and Rogers?
It's based on the manual and uniform traffic control devices and the 4-hour and 8-hour volumes. I know that the volumes projected in this didn't meet the side street traffic at Anderson was not enough to meet that warning, a traffic signal with this project. Potentially with build out of other projects in the long-term future, potentially those could be met, but they weren't met with the addition of this project traffic.
Okay. Thank you very much. Is Mike Morgan available? He's our airport expert. Mike Morgan?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I'm a little hard of hearing.
It's okay, I'll try to talk louder. So you've been acquainted, you said, for 40 years about airports and so on. So what is the type of plane that will be flying out of the Vance Branch Airport, say, in 10 years? Do you have an idea, maybe?
Crystal ball, there are fewer and fewer prop planes, turboprops, more and more corporate jet type aircraft in the fleet. So I can just say on a nationwide basis, fewer and fewer prop planes, more corporate jets. They're also the corporate jets are getting much quieter. Every couple of years there's a new stage where the planes are getting quieter and quieter. Does that answer your question?
It's getting there. So now Vance Branch is not a tower control, correct?
No, it's not. That's the best of my knowledge, right? I haven't looked into that.
So this is, I'm not sure. I've never self-flown. I'm just listening to people who have. So it's an instrument kind of a flight, and they sight to see if,
Well, the tower control and the instrument is two different questions.
understood?
Many airports, even with commercial service, don't have towers. They're all controlled by, there's a radio frequency you call in, you clear the runway, and you land, and you declare your intentions. Everybody that's in the airport area hears that. So that's the difference between tower and not tower. And it's not unusual at all not to have a tower. Instrument and visual, there's two different kinds of flight rules. Your pilot, well, I'm not sure he's here anymore, probably answer it better. But there are visual flight rules where you take off and go where you want, or there are instrument approaches to an airport. You do have an instrument approach. And that instrument approach, all those corporate aircraft, those jets, corporate jets, are going to be flying instrument approaches. They all just put it into their computer and they fly right down the middle, right down that extended line, and they'll land on that runway. So most of the planes you see flying around different places are VFR, and they're the prop planes. And those corporate aircraft are flying right down the middle of that runway on instruments.
Which of the two, flying over a residential area, would you rather be in?
Would I rather be? If you're flying over a residential, either one, although an instrument approach will allow you to keep your proper elevation all the way onto the runway. Now, prop planes, your turboprops, even though they don't fly IFR all the time, many of them, most of them, are equipped to do so if they choose to.
Okay, so the more frequent is the corporate, you'd rather be on that, and if those are where we're going, most likely, that's what's going to be flying over, say, in 10 years.
If national trends hold, then you will have more and more corporate jets and quieter corporate jets, and you'll have fewer of the prop planes, yes.
Okay, and this is kind of an off question from this, but you might know the answer. So if someone is flying on a regular commercial airline now, and they're flying out of that airport down south there in Jefferson County, there is a point at which the noise increases after they're away from the airport as they gain altitude. Is that not correct?
Not scientifically, no.
Okay, I just want to...
No, it is not. Certainly, if they come over you, and if the aircraft is directly over you, you're going to hear it better. But no, the noise does not increase the further out you go. Typically, the further out you go, the higher your elevation. The noise should decrease scientifically.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
That's everything.
Thank you. Next, Commissioner Popkin.
Thank you, Chair. Question for Margaret and Derek with the applicants, or anyone from the applicant team who might know this answer. So I'll ask the question, and feel free, anyone can speak up. And this is a very different type of question than what we've handled right now. Was Rocky Mountain Institute, or RMI, involved in any advisory or consulting role for the design of Modern West 2?
For the design of Modern West 1, not 2.
But not for 2?
No.
Okay. Great, thank you for clarifying. And Jennifer, to your understanding, Rocky Mountain Institute was also not involved with the design for Modern West 2?
I have had no communications, nor have I seen their names on any documentation I've received regarding this project.
Okay, thank you. And then just to confirm, Derek, in no way, shape, or form for Modern West 2 was Rocky Mountain Institute, or otherwise known as RMI, receiving advisory, consulting, or other fee-for-service based support?
No.
Okay, thank you. As full disclosure for the commission, I'm an employee of Rocky Mountain Institute, so I just wanted to disclose that. Based on the answers that I have heard, I see no reason to recuse myself from this discussion, but I was aware that they were involved in Modern West 1, and so I wanted to understand if they were involved in any way, shape, or form, even though I didn't see it in the documentation, if they were involved in Modern West 2. Had they been involved in Modern West 2, per the recent update of City Code of Ethics, I would have recused myself from voting on this, and just wanted to disclose that transparently. Great, thank you. A couple questions here while you're standing there, Derek. You mentioned some of the sustainability attributes of the project when you were first standing here. Just some of them got lost in a lot of the everything we were learning there. Can you just reiterate and clarify Specifically, like how would you describe Modern West 2 contributing to a more sustainable and resilient Longmont, as is the central vision of Envision Longmont?
So all of our residential units will be electric, fully electric. The only natural gas would be for amenity spaces or any commercial space. It's very difficult to pull off all electric for commercial spaces. We have EV parking and EV bikes, quite a number of them planned for both sites. We have shared parking identified between the uses, which will minimize car traffic. Car share program. Functional turf, so we're going to use less irrigation on certain pocket park areas. And we are designing our water quality areas to be multi-use, so we change the slope of the detention areas so that people can access them and use them. And that creates more greenway. And that's where we are right now.
Great, thank you. And then in addition to
And
those-
solar panels.
On the roof?
Yeah.
Yeah. Great, thank you. In addition to being a very sustainable design here, I believe it was mentioned before that it's meeting the 12% affordable housing criteria, right? So you're meeting the city's affordability and housing standards, designing to fairly high advanced sustainability metrics here, connecting to regional greenways and other let's say non-car based transportation systems. That's great. Overall, it aligns with that checks a lot of the boxes with Envision Longmont here. So thank you for all the good work that went into that. One clarifying question, Jennifer, you and I emailed about this briefly, and for whatever reason, I wasn't able to fully comprehend the answer, and that's on the greenway connectivity. Either one of you can answer. I just wanted to confirm, Modern West 2 is south of Rogers Road, correct?
Correct.
So the connection spur over to the Likens Gulch Trail, that little spur, is that owned by your team? Is like what, or does it already exist? And maybe I'm just not remembering biking along it ever before.
So in terms of greenway ownership, it's pretty much city policy that if it's part of a designated greenway system, it's going to be dedicated to the city for ownership.
Okay, and so the spur there that connects from the Likens Gulch Trail to Rogers Road, it's a very small spur there. Is that already built? Is that going to be built? I just want to make sure that this can be connected truly. What the intention of the applicant is can actually be connected into the regional trail system.
Yeah, on the north side of Rogers, it's like a dirt kind of path, but it's not paved and developed. I think that's city open space.
Okay, so there's no question of ownership or access.
Yeah, that little piece will be city developed.
Good. That was what I was hoping to clarify there. Otherwise, this seems exceptionally aligned with Envision Longmont's land use, connectivity, transportation, housing, sustainability goals. Thanks for the good work on this.
Yeah.
I have one clarifying question. I think, Derek, you're good. Maybe for Mike again. Welcome back. On the airport impact, I've heard a lot of things and read a lot of things, more than I ever knew, on airport zones and influence. And so I guess I just want to clarify for myself and maybe my fellow commissioners and the public here what I'm actually reading and what's actually pertinent to this. And so when I look at, where's that page? When I look at the letter dated May 22nd, 2023 from the FAA,
Yes.
there are two lines that stand out to me. The first is, this aeronautical study revealed that the structure, I presume that's referring to Modern West 2 plans, does not exceed obstruction standards and would not be a hazard to air navigation. Is that speaking broadly to air navigation, to a small subset of a piece of what this FAA office considers?
No, this is a determination that this proposed building at this location, at this elevation, will not interfere with any air navigation.
Okay. So that should be taken as written as would not be a hazard to air navigation.
Air navigation, it could be commercial, it could be a prop plane, it could be a corporate jet, any of those.
Okay. And then later on in that letter, a little bit lower down on the same page, it says, based on this evaluation, marking and lighting are not necessary for aviation safety. So as a layperson here, would it be fair to assume that if there was a potential safety hazard implied, that the FAA at a minimum would say, please adhere to marking and lighting on these structures so that pilots can see? Like,
Yeah, I wouldn't put it quite that way.
Okay.
I
How
would
would you put
say if this building could be a little higher and still comply with and still obtain a determination of no hazard, but it would have to have lighting. It is low enough that it does not have to have lighting.
okay, so not only is, if I'm understanding what you're saying correctly, not only is this not a hazard to air navigation according to the FAA letter, it is also not at a level where it would require or the FAA would deem necessary having marking and lighting for
Correct.
it to be
Correct.
safely designed and still not a hazard to air navigation.
Correct.
Thank you. Jennifer, do you agree with what Mike was just saying there too?
That is my understanding.
Grant, same question to you?
That is my understanding as well.
Okay, thank you. The last air-related question I have here is about a month later, or 3 weeks later, June 13th, 2023. That's when the FAA then sent a letter that said it views the proposed development as incompatible land use and contrary to a lot of things. Is there something at odds between those two letters? Is that overruling the previous letter, or are they speaking on separate things?
No, it does not overrule the previous letter. It's not dealing with the same subject.
What is the subject of the second letter?
The second letter,
The June 20
Mr. Sweeney, who's employed by the FAA, wrote that in his opinion, the development would not be a compatible land use. Now, not from a point of a hazard, but not a compatible land use. Now, we asked Mr. Sweeney, we wrote to him and asked, on what basis? What's the standard you're trying to apply on this letter? Because it's a mystery to us. He did not respond. So I can't tell you what he meant. And I believe the staff asked him the same question, and he did not respond, just referring the staff to the advisory circular. Well,
the advisory circular being the letter we're talking about
correct.
right now.
And I've read all 100 and so many pages of it as well. And no, there's nothing in the advisory circular that would prohibit this development. As a matter of fact, several of the changes that have been made actually address what that advisory circular says. So
And we're
changes
done
have
on a
been-
voluntary basis?
Yes.
Yeah.
Changes have been made since you received that letter from FAA over a year ago.
Thank you. I think I'm good with you, Mike. Thank you.
All right.
Grant and Jennifer, just a couple more clarifications for you both here. Just to confirm what the applicant was saying, are you aware that the applicant reached out to the FAA to clarify what that June 13th, 2023 letter was referring to?
Yes, and the city staff also reached out to the FAA.
Independently?
I would
or
say
related?
Related.
Like separately
I mean,
from
we
the
had
applicant?
we all had the same letter. So we had some meetings with this particular office that included, city staff. We also had meetings with them that included the applicant team as well, trying to get clarification, and.
So that's
not a lot of clarification was provided.
Understood. So you did reach out, but it wasn't a case of them not responding. You did end up talking with this office.
Absolutely. I've spoken with them several times.
And did they offer any additional clarity as to what was incompatible specifically?
Not really.
Okay. Grant, same question, just to dot my I's and cross my T's.
I'll actually need to defer to Jennifer. I was actually not included in any of those discussions.
Fair enough.
So effectively, and I will try to keep my sarcasm to a minimum here, we asked specifically, okay, you think this use, what's incompatible? What uses do you think would be compatible? And we were essentially told it's not our job to determine what uses are compatible or are incompatible, but basically they'll tell us if we think it's incompatible. So they didn't really give us a lot of guidance. They said, here's this advisory circular, figure it out, basically. So.
Okay, so just to be perfectly clear, sarcasm aside, you don't have any clarity effectively as to what is deemed incompatible as pertains to this June 13th, 2023 advisory letter.
Correct. I mean, generally
Okay.
the feedback we received is they want to see as little residential as possible in an undefined area distance of the airport. That's basically what it comes down to.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Grant.
Commissioner Height.
Following on, Senior Planner Hewitt Apperson, who is Levi Brown?
Levi Brown is the manager of Vance Brand Airport.
Does he happen to be here?
He is currently not here, but Phil Greenwald, who is our transportation planning manager, is here.
Phil, man of many
hats.
Transportation hats. Does the airport manager have any concern with possible expansion of the airport to bring in bigger yet quieter jets?
Commissioner Height, does he have concern about bringing in bigger?
And and the impact of a larger airport on a closer residential community.
I think our airport manager does have concerns whenever there's residential near the airport because he knows he will get the complaints for noise.
Okay, fair enough. Jennifer, back to you. I think the report or somewhere I heard there were changes made to the concept plan based upon this letter. What were those changes? Well, maybe I'm misunderstanding.
Sure. Let me.
If there weren't changes, let me know that.
No, so let me bring up my presentation real quick just to bring that concept plan back up on. So effectively, and I will show you, I've got some supplemental map imagery as well. This particular map is something that we have, come on. Apparently it didn't want to go to the map I wanted. Bear with me for a minute. So you'll see this red and this orange hatched area.
Yep.
These areas were calculated based on coordinates and parameters within the advisory circular that the FAA provided us relating to land use compatibility in the vicinity of airports.
That's runway 29 extended.
Pretty much. So the red is the direct, basically the runway protection zone. This orange is basically kind of the approach zone. So effectively, so then you have the Modern West 2 site, which is right here. So the southwestern corner of the site would have fallen, is in what we determined would probably be this zone. Now, again, this is not something that we have codified. This is something that we've presented to council for discussion purposes, but it is based on the advisory circular. So the revisions that were made, sorry about this, were to basically, so you'll see where this outlot here and the commercial area here are. That is roughly where that approach zone lies, overlays the Modern West 2 site.
Orange, not red.
The orange, yes.
Okay.
I apologize. The red is the no-go zone. Yeah. Nothing goes in the red zone. So this is that airport. This is that runway approach zone. So the revisions that were made were basically to make sure there were no residential uses proposed for this zone. So that was, we thought represented a reasonable compromise that met the intent of the advisory circular. It didn't diminish there were some rearrangements on the site that really didn't diminish the acreage for residential uses. It was reconfigured to keep it out of that zone, basically as a compromise.
Fair enough. and I forget the member of the public's first name, but she commented
Drew.
appositely that, hey, you know, commercial has a lot more people during the day than likely than you might expect during in residential during the evening. How is that concern addressed, if at all?
So one of the concerns, the way it was phrased, that I recall from our aviation, from our FAA folks, is essentially when you're in your residence, you're not as necessarily as on as much alert as you would be if you were somewhere else. I don't have a very good explanation for it, but effectively the guidance on land use compatibility was that high density residential uses probably shouldn't be in the approach zone. That was the guidance. They recommend not doing high density residential. Commercial uses are fine.
Okay. Last question on this, because this horse is, well, it's still running. Did you take this plan back to Mr. Sweeney?
We did not.
Okay, fair enough. I actually think it was Ms. Fromm's presentation I want to talk about next, which is secondary uses. She had a beautiful table of all the different uses in the MUE area. I don't know if you can pull that back up. Maybe you have it.
Let's see. Oh, actually, you know what? I do have that in my. Give me one moment here.
I thought I saw it in yours.
Yeah, I did clip it for reference purposes to make it easy for us all. Come on, man. Sorry about that. Okay, there we go.
All right, so I've ridden a different horse on this issue about whether or not it should be district-wide, planning district-wide, or the zoning district-wide versus individual lot within the particular zoning area. Run me through this if you can. We get to a total, and I think Ms. Fromm was saying it was 34% total of secondary uses existing today?
No, that would include the existing and those proposed as part of Modern West too.
Okay. So
as
this plan brings it up to 34% secondary uses.
Correct.
Within, okay. And there was more than just residential. What were the other secondary
So
uses?
the other secondary uses would be the boat and RV storage that are.
That's a secondary?
That's a secondary
Okay.
use. That is the boat and RV storage. That's, I think it's called Anderson Storage or something, as well as the self-storage uses on the east side of Anderson Street.
Okay. And then there are some properties that are unincorporated.
Correct.
Boulder County. And they are or aren't incompatible secondary uses, or I didn't understand
Many
that.
of those are undeveloped, so it doesn't.
Just farmland.
Yeah, they're undeveloped, or they may have. There's one that has like a veterinary office on it, which I think would be.
Gone to that bad.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that would be compatible with primary uses in MUE.
Okay, and I guess staff is comfortable that the race to, because as we've heard, commercial and office space is not going to happen. It's a rush to put in secondary residential uses, and should we be allowing first to come, even when there's others who haven't even been annexed into the lovely city of Longmont yet? Should we allow these first in time to dictate, we get up to 50%, then you're done, no more residential? Or are we just kicking down the road the need to rezone this area? What's your thought on that?
I think that's a larger policy discussion to be had, but at this point, it first in time is the approach that we've been taking.
Okay. That's all I have.
Thank you. Commissioner Kolar.
There you go. So I have some more questions about the FAA. Sorry. My first question is, in the determination of no hazard, The structure is defined as a commercial use building corner 1. To me, that doesn't, I'm wondering if the FAA made their determination of no hazard because they thought it was commercial use, not residential.
I will defer to the applicant team on that. Those determinations typically are based on building height, is my understanding. Versus, I mean, they're looking at physical structures more than anything.
We just put a lot of emphasis on the value in this no hazard, and I'm just wondering
sorry.
if it's truly
I
describing
didn't hear the
project.
question.
So in the determination of no hazard from the FAA,
Yes.
the structure that they define where it gives the lat longs, the heights, it's called a commercial use building corner number 1. So I wonder if they understand what we're asking by proposing residential, and they're giving us a nod to commercial use.
I think that was simply the way the building was described. There is no differentiation between residential and commercial with respect to the height of the building. It's
Okay.
exactly the same. I think it may have just been described that way in the application.
Okay. So then my next question related to this same form is that it expires in November of this year.
Yes.
Without any construction, I assume is nowhere near going to
No,
make that deadline.
It can be extended once as a matter of
For how long?
a right. You know, I'd have to look at it. It's either a year or 2. Then you have to reapply. But the standards, there's been no proposal to change the standards, so I think the standards should be the same.
So even if the FAA saw the Denver offices of the FFA's letter and we had to reapply for this, you feel confident you'd still get the no hazard?
This is done by a computer.
Okay.
Yes, that these are standards. You look at the elevation heights, and you look at you look at the runway, and essentially you do this computer diagram. Does it meet the standard or doesn't it? And that's what pops out the end. Yes.
Okay. And that looks beyond the approach zone, right? This no hazard?
Oh,
Or
yes, it does.
Okay.
Yes.
It's looking at this entire parcel.
I'm sorry.
This reviewed the entire development on the parcel, not
Yes.
just the...
Yes, it did. Well, I think we sent in the surveys of the corners of the building where the corners are nearest to the runway. There's certain points that you need to designate. Yes.
Okay. And I think my next question might be a staff question. So the letter from John Sweeney, he mentions that failure to comply with their recommendation terminates eligibility for grants and the suspending the payment of grants to the airport. That seems huge to me. Is that being considered at a city level?
I'm going to let Phil talk about this a little bit more, but it has definitely generated a lot of discussion on our side.
I can tell you, if I may.
Please.
In 40 years, I have never seen the FAA come after suspend an airport's grant funds based upon this kind of land use decision. I've seen them do it for other reasons, but I've never seen them do it for this reason, particularly under these circumstances. I've consulted with other aviation attorneys, and we're all scratching our head as to why they would have said that, because they have never done that before.
But this is a more recent thing where they're coming around and sending these letters out.
Right. The grant assurance that whenever the city gets a grant, you sign a contract. The contract has 39 grant assurances, contractual provisions. One of those is Grant Assurance 21. It says, the city will take appropriate action to the extent reasonable, including the adoption of zoning laws, to restrict the use of land adjacent to or in the immediate vicinity of the airport to activities and purposes compatible with normal airport operations. What's compatible? We've said we've received the no hazard determination from FAA. We meet the noise standards. We meet the advisory circular. We meet all applicable FAA standards having to do with compatibility. So a lot of these things are fact, but my opinion is that this approval of this would not hazard your grant assurances. There's just no standard that would be violated.
And Commissioner Calder, I'll just go on to say that from a staff level, of course, we did take that very seriously. We depend on those grants for normal operations of the airport, and they're just kind of things that we count on every year. And so when that, quite frankly, threat was made, we took it very seriously, and that's why we moved on to that next level of how can we mitigate this through the control of the land use that's based on the circular. So that's when we took that next level of action and started talking with about where we could restrict residential development.
Was there a reason why we didn't attempt to go back to John Sweeney after you made those revisions to get a revised letter or a change of opinion?
I would say the biggest reason is we didn't think we would get a different response from him. I mean, to be perfectly blunt.
So you feel like you wouldn't get a different response, but we do feel like we made the necessary changes we think he was asking for.
We think that the revisions represent a reasonable compromise between that balances their concerns and everyone and the city's needs as well as the applicant's needs.
Okay. And it's sort of on these same lines.
And it was also based on recommendations from our legal counsel.
Okay. So along these same lines, you can't ignore the Broomfield issue right now. What kind of discussions were had? I just think about our successor someday maybe having to field a lawsuit from these residences that move in a 4-story building at the end of a runway.
Oh, he has a good answer.
Okay.
But I was going to just say from our airport manager's standpoint, those were his concerns. Was the risk now being introduced by these other lawsuits from around the, just south of us, basically.
Yeah.
So those lawsuits were real and active, and he was concerned that we were opening ourselves up for risk. So that was why we took it to our legal counsel and took the actions we did.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, there are 2 lawsuits pending against the Rocky Mountain Regional Airport. The first is inverse condemnation, and that is brought by a number of homeowners whose avigation easements were allowed to expire. There was a loophole in them. And sure enough, the loophole came about, and a district judge in Boulder County threw out those avigation easements. You do not have the same kind of avigation easement. You have an ironclad avigation easement that does not expire and does not have any conditions to it. So that kind of a lawsuit could not be brought against you. Second lawsuit is in nuisance, and it's brought by the towns of Superior and Boulder County, who butt up against the end of the Rocky Mountain Regional Airport's runway. You butt up against your own runway, so you'd be suing yourself, essentially. So those 2 laws, I'm not saying anybody can be sued for anything at any time. We all know that. But those 2 lawsuits could not be brought against you with respect to these projects.
Maybe one last question while you're standing there. I drive by Airport Road every day, see those planes flying very close. I personally would never live on a 4th floor building anywhere near there. Would you?
I don't like living on the 4th floor anyway. Would I want to? If I could choose not to live next to an airport, I wouldn't. But people get to make choices. If they have affordable housing, they want to live there, they have other amenities they like, they get to make that choice.
Yeah. I was thinking mostly from a safety perspective. Personally, I think, I live I live in the airport influence zone. It's loud, but it's fine. You get used to it. But from a safety perspective, I wonder.
Well, from a safety perspective, I'm a lawyer. I'm not a safety expert. FAA is a safety expert. FAA has given the no hazard to air determination that these buildings will not interfere with air navigation.
Have you ever been through O'Hare or to LaGuardia? So our project in Virginia, where we renovated the 108-year-old schoolhouse and built the new construction, that schoolhouse sits on a hill, and it's 8 minutes from the Richmond International Airport where 727s land. And sometimes it looks like they're landing in your living room, because I actually live in 2 places here and there, and I have a unit there. And we just upgraded the STC, the glazing, the glass. and built interior storms because we did tax credits on the old building. And you don't hear it very much, but I mean, you hear them taking off and landing, but you don't, it's not like a prop plane flying over you, but it's like a train. When you live next to the train, you get used to it. You know, it just doesn't, it disappears from your consciousness over time. And so I think it really just depends. I mean, a lot of people, I like it here because it's quieter. I don't, I sleep better. But I like some of the things about being in the city there. And there are things I like about both. And so I think there's a lot of people like that. And I don't think we are literally 8 minutes from an international airport where 727's landed. We've never had a single noise complaint from any of our tenants. We have almost 300 apartments in addition to the other uses there. So never a single complaint.
But the Longmont Airport, Phil, has gotten a number of complaints already. Is that right?
Well, the Longmont Airport gets a number of complaints, but they're from just a few individuals, is the way kind of Longmont's.
And are they noise related primarily?
Typically. But again, it's a few households, but a lot of complaints.
I'm personally struggling with this application because I do think it's a great development. I really appreciate the tenacity of the developer to stick with this for 8 years. And then also to build the affordable housing on site rather than just pay the fee. I mean, that's huge in my mind. But I do really struggle with the compatibility from a safety perspective, mostly in my mind, with the airport. But.
Commissioner Popkin.
Thank you, Chair. Seeing no other microphones in the queue, and I think the Commission has asked some really astute questions here to try to gauge the impact on the airport, understand the adverse impacts on surrounding properties, if any, tried to really clarify what this FAA letter situation actually means. And it sounds like staff has done a lot of due diligence to really run down this in a commendable way and understand what makes sense here, as well as the applicant for making adjustments to the project to work around the orange zone. I forget exactly what the approach area. Hearing that and seeing that this application complies with the other review criteria in my mind, I move to approve resolution PZR 20244A, a resolution of the Planning and Zoning Commission recommending approval of the Modern West 2 concept plan amendment.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Commissioner Height.
Will second.
Okay. I have a clarifying question for the applicant. For areas 2 and 3, which are multifamily residential, what are you looking? I mean, multifamily is kind of a catch-all. What are you looking at putting in for the multifamily? What kind of housing?
So we've looked at both townhomes and for sale and for rent and apartments. And the reason for that is to explore the possibilities for a mix of attainable and affordable housing. We are doing apartments on Modern West 1. We may end up doing all townhomes on Modern West 2. So we're not, because of the situation with the letter from the FAA and our efforts to try to communicate with them and then not hearing anything back, it's been it took about a year. It actually stalled our project for about a year. So we were in a fairly robust master planning mode and sending things back and forth with Jennifer and saying, can we do this? What about that? And we just sort of hit a dead stop. So I can't definitively answer your question, but we have spoken with, as you heard tonight, Habitat here in Longmont, who builds for sale affordable. And we are also doing other projects with Flatirons Habitat, who has a factory to build panelized construction to do attainable, which is more workforce. And we're kind of curious about how we might get both. So we will have some townhomes. We may have some apartments as well on the north side of the ditch. closer to Rogers, but we may just do townhomes.
Okay, and I was just gonna add, if I had my brother, I know this is a concept plan, so it doesn't have to be discussed this time, but if you were to do townhomes and apartments, I would prefer to have the apartments on the north half. Just because.
That for sure is how it would go. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Commissioner Kolar?
Sorry, I have one follow-up question I just thought of, and maybe Jennifer can answer this too. So because it is a concept plan, can they change their mind about just paying into the affordable housing fee, or is that now determined and final?
So ultimately, that decision is made far later in the process. So, at this point, they can state their intent to do the on-site. It's a discretionary action, so council ultimately could decide to make that a condition of approval. Typically, though, in terms of if they're doing it on site versus fee in lieu, that agreement and contract essentially with the city is done at a much later state in the development review process.
Okay, and I just want to say that I'll be in favor of this. I'm looking at it overall, and while sometimes I do get a little nervous with housing in that area by the airport, it is zoned that way. We did get the approval by the FAA with the letter for, I just want to make sure I stated it right, of no hazard to air navigation. So given that, I will be in voting for this. Commissioner Popkin.
Yeah, just a couple final comments here. In addition to the good faith effort that I believe that not only good faith, but actual meaningful adjustments that the applicant and staff have helped shepherd here for this project, I just want to note that I think the applicant has demonstrated a commitment to effective, sustainable design, and a lot of that can help mitigate noise concerns and frankly make it a really attractive place for people to live. So at the end of the day, it is their choice whether they want to rent or buy, depending on the structure of the housing. I hope they will make the decision that makes sense for them. And I'm encouraged by the fact that the applicant is trying to put together such a high quality proposal here that aligns with so many pillars of Envision Longmont that it should be an attractive place for a lot of reasons, and applicants will make that choice that best, prospective renters or owners of that property or those rental units will make the choice that best fits them. So, thank you.
Commissioner Boone.
Thank you, Chair. So I came into this discussion with a huge concern about the airport. Nothing really about the proposed development itself. I think it meets all the criteria. It sounds like you're doing a great thing for housing, sustainability. You've thought it through very nicely. That letter was a zinger for me, and it sounds like it was for staff as well. What I didn't have clarity on was that the concept came through in quite a different way before that letter was written, and that the current proposal was never responded to by Mr. Sweeney. So I was getting information from the FAA saying two different things, and I had real problems with that. So I thank you for the clarity, and I think my concerns that were initially there have been addressed, and I will be supporting the project. Good job.
Thank you. Commissioner Flagg.
I think I heard, I think it was actually Margaret Freund that actually said that they were making anybody who bought or rented a home or an apartment in that area, they were being made aware that there was an airport off to the west there. And I used to plan in an area that was south of DIA, and we had to make sure the city of Aurora, because I worked for Denver, let the people know that, see that big building over there? That's an airport. because they didn't want to tell people who might be buying in the subdivisions just south of there that there could be noise in the future because not all the runways were built. So I really appreciate the endeavors that you've gone to make sure that people will know, and that you've taken such care and have an expert that has advised you and is knowledgeable about planes. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions from the commission, let's go ahead and vote. It's PZR 2024-4A, a resolution of the Planning and Zoning Commission recommending approval of the Modern West 2 concept plan amendment.
Commissioner Height.
Aye.
Commissioner Tetta.
Aye.
Commissioner Boone. Chair Poland.
Aye.
Commissioner Flake. Commissioner Kohler. Commissioner Popkin. Chairman, that passes 6-1.
Thank you very much. This item will now be forwarded to the Longmont City Council for action. If you are unfamiliar with council procedures and intend to appear before City Council, please contact the Planning Division for further information at 303-651-8330. That is the end of the public hearing items. Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you, applicant, for the presentation. We'll move on. Next item is final call, public invited to be heard. If there's anybody in the public who would like to come forward and speak on an item that's not quasi-judicial, that will be in front of us. Seeing nobody come forward, I'll go ahead and close out final call, public invited to be heard. Next is items from the commission. Commissioner Popkin.
I'll keep this super brief, but we had an interesting discussion earlier on what it means, what Envision Longmont indicates for a regional center. And it seems like that proposal was not the right time to set a precedent as a commission. But I'll just make a note that I think it's worth, whenever Envision Longmont is, or the code is revisited at some point, that we take into serious consideration what the actual intention of a regional center is, or other similar designations, and whether that fully aligns with the permitted, secondary permitted, and conditional secondary permitted uses, or conditional secondary uses actually are, and whether that's fully aligned.
Thank you. And if different regional centers can have different uses that are more appropriate to them than others. Any other items from the commission? Items from, Commissioner Flake.
Along those lines, I was thinking that perhaps we need to review the uses within some of those districts and take another look based on the pandemic, based on what we know to be our habits that are changing. So maybe we need to look at those uses a little better, and maybe we can even figure out how to put certain uses in with enough square footage to make a difference and make them viable. Just a thought.
Okay, thank you. Items from Planning and Development Services, Grant Pedlin.
I think just one this evening, Chair, members of the commission. We do have one item scheduled for July 17th, so that definitely will be a public hearing.
Okay, thank you very much. Seeing no other business, we are in adjournment.